All right, welcome to the conversation. So you probably noticed the Republicans passing bills all across the country against transgender folks. They are the latest targets because the right wing always has to find the other, and now they, in a sense, have to expand their circle of hate. And that's what they've done. We want to bring on a reporter to talk about it. Canela Lopez is a transgender health reporter at The Insider. Canela, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Cenk.
No problem. So you wrote about Pride event, and so I think most people know how it started, but just in case they don't, how did the Pride parades in America start?
Absolutely. So the Pride parades in the US kind of began as a culmination of existing organizing that was happening with queer and trans, basically activists. So this happened in 1969 in New York City. It was brought on by a lot of tension between police forces and existing queer folks who were all congregating at the Stonewall Inn, which is a historic bar that still exists in New York City today. But essentially, queer folks were sick and tired of having to exist in a situation in which police were consistently brutalizing queer folks simply for existing. At this point in New York City, there were still existing laws that banned cross-dressing and required folks to wear enough articles of clothing for the gender they were assigned at birth. So, these people were sick, they were tired. It was a lot of Black and brown trans organizers who just wanted the brutality to stop. So essentially the Stonewall Inn was raided during the month of Pride, before Pride was a thing, and people fought back. So it culminated in this big riot that ended up lasting for about 6 days. And at the end of it, we had the birth essentially of the queer liberation movement as we know it modernly. And after that point, there was a march that would happen every year to commemorate the riot and to kind of pay homage to the organizers and the work that was put in to push back against authority figures.
Is that still what's happening with Pride parades?
It's definitely shifted a bit, especially in the last, I would say, 20 years, as queer people have gotten a lot more acceptance in the US, which is fantastic. It's really important that we're seeing a lot more acceptance of queer and trans folks. However, as queer and trans folks are seen as more of a part of mainstream society, that means that our dollars really matter, particularly to corporations. So we've seen increasingly more corporations kind of sponsoring Pride events. So you'll get Bank of America, you'll get Chase, you'll get a lot of large organizations that will cater their products to Pride. Like if you look at Target's Pride collection. And this is good in some ways because there's a lot of donations that happen to queer organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, which definitely need the money to continue to do the important work that they do. However, it also means that as queerness becomes more acceptable, at least in a mainstream view, it means that the original people that it was organized for, so we're talking about sex workers, addicts, kinksters, trans folks in general, queer people of color, are really being pushed more to the margins as it becomes more acceptable and becomes more sanitized for the everyday cookie cutter American family, if that makes sense.
All right, so what's the alternative? What can we do?
I think it's really important that words are followed up with action. So representation is incredibly important. And I really don't want to undermine the importance and value of having corporations include queer people in big campaigns and make us really visible, because that means that a lot of queer and trans youth are able to see themselves growing up, which does greatly reduce suicide rates. So I don't want to undermine that, but I think it's important that words are followed up by action. So rather than corporations, asking for kink not to be at Pride or trying to push certain, forms of Pride celebrations, there just needs to be more active donation to organizations that are already driving this conversation and doing the work. So there are plenty of Black trans organizations that specifically cater to the communities that are the most marginal within the LGBTQ umbrella. So great organizations like For the Girls, the Okra Project. I think it's important for corporations to be donating to these spots and kind of letting these organizers who are local, who are already doing this work, take control of the conversation and just really redistribute resources, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so Canela, we have Republicans, as I said in the beginning, passing laws trying to make sure that transgender athletes can't play on, I guess, girls' teams is what the laws are about. It's first of all not much of an actual problem in several states when they so-called problem when they asked, "Hey, do you know a single case of this happening?" The lawmakers who passed those laws couldn't name a single case. So that leads to the obvious conclusion that they're not trying to address any issue. But what's the issue anyway? Really, like it's just all it is hate, right? But since it doesn't even exist really as something that they could even point to, not that transgender folks don't play in high school sports, but any issue that has arisen out of that in Texas, right? As an example. By the way, their residents freeze to death, and now they have no electricity in the winter, but they're busy passing nonsense laws based on hate. But a lot of people might think, well, okay, since it's not that big of an issue, meaning like this is not a real controversy that's ripping apart different high schools, etc. It's a dumb law, it's a hateful law, but does it really, how much harm does it do? And I wanted you to address that.
The harm done by these bills, even though there's some statistics out there about the number of trans youth, it's important to understand that there are more and more trans youth coming out every day. So the idea that it doesn't affect that many people in the US, there aren't that many trans people that exist, so it isn't an issue, is really a misconception. And also, even if it's only affecting one child, it is really actively harmful to be having these bills that are targeting children for trying to exist. And advocates have said it again and again that these kinds of bills do drive up rates of suicide. They drive up rates of depression, anxiety within trans youth. And even if we allow one of these bills to pass and it only impacts like a handful of students, which that's not the case, it sets a really dangerous precedent. And it's a slippery slope, essentially. So if you pass these bills, what's to stop Republican legislators from then proposing more extreme bills that actively target trans healthcare? For example, Arkansas is the first state in the country that has passed active legislation that is going to prevent trans youth from getting life-saving medical care. It's just about the precedent that these kinds of bills set for future laws that could truly be even more harmful.
Yeah, and beyond that, I think that since they can't point to any controversies that they think they're trying to address, that the point of the bills is hate. That the idea is to propagate that hate as much as humanly possible so that they could have some others to fight back against. And so that's gonna lead to a question, because it used to be black folks in this country, and by the way, it was always everyone, right? It was black folks and gay folks and trans folks, etc., that were being discriminated against. But there were different groups that were focused on at different times politically, right? And so obviously during Jim Crow it was black folks. Then it became gay folks, and as late as 2004, for sure, Bush ran on no gay marriage, and they put that as ballot measures all across the country. But now, as more people have come out, Republicans realize, oh, I have gay folks in my family, I have LGBT people, but they don't have as many trans folks apparently that they know. So they've extended out the boundary of who it's acceptable to hate. And so what I'm curious about is, does that create any issue within the LGBTQ movement? Or no, is everybody still super united? It doesn't matter, they come for us, one of us, they come for all of us.
It's interesting being within an umbrella term, because I think that people do forget that LGBTQ stands for so many communities, right? With so many different interests. And it kind of is related to what I was speaking about earlier when we were talking about respectability and what happens when queer people become more acceptable. So even though gay marriage is legal and it's legally recognized now, there are plenty of, queer folks who are able to get married. That doesn't necessarily mean there's the same kind of respectability for trans people. So what's interesting is you do see a lot of cisgender gay folks who will actively be standing against trans people and say that, you're setting back the movement by advocating for your views. You're setting back the movement because you're not a part of, what is respectable currently. So, I mean, we even see that within the trans community, right? So you'll get people who are able to access hormones, who, are wealthier or white and are able to look a certain way and be acceptable trans people. Whereas, you get non-binary folks who may not want to start hormones in the first place. So there's definitely a lot of fractioning within the community and so many different interests that need to be represented within 1 month, which makes it even more frustrating when corporations are getting involved with their own interest.
And we should not allow Republicans to pass these hateful laws anywhere without clearly explaining and pointing out, no, that is specifically for hatred. And if you're with that, you're on that side, and there should be no equivocation about it. So I hope whether it's Pride events or anything else, that message gets out clearer. But Canela Lopez writes about this for Insider. So Canela, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me.
Are you our next stream star?
Oh my God, that's me?
Show us what you got with your Twitch pitch. All you need to do is put together a 2-minute audition video on why you should have your own stream on TYT, and then put it on Twitter and use the hashtag TwitchPitch, plus tag us at The Young Turks. And if you needed even more information than that, tyt.com/TwitchPitch has all the info you need. I can't wait to see your videos.
All right, welcome to Dr. Rashad Richey Indisputable. This is going to be quite interesting. I don't know if you can handle this much truth on any day of the week.
The unrest inside of the Black community and communities that support them. It's because these cops are not held accountable.
You have a family calling 911, and that family is expecting help, not expecting their loved one to be killed by the very people they pay to protect and serve them.
Did you ever notice a cop that you work with call any black person the N-word or target people because they were black?
Nope.
But we disagree that somehow police officers are not also subject to the same systemic biases and racism as any other level of law enforcement.
It sounds like for everybody's need who wants to crucify the cops without looking at it.
No, crucify bad cops, brother.
Of
bad
course,
cops.
We don't need the government to step into our lives, mandating that we should be wearing a mask.
You think you putting on a mask, Trey, is government intrusion, but you don't think the government telling a woman what she can or cannot do with her body it isn't government intrusion.
Where does life begin?
You want to go there? I can read it to you, brother.
You seem very well prepared. Certainly more.
Of course, why would I not be well prepared? They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform throughout this country, so I won't stop, and you won't stop either.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watched the show in the morning. Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
I am TYT.
I am TYT. I am TYT.
I am TYT.
I am TYT.
Breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. This is Brett Ehrlich with breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. Bernie Sanders wants to break Wall Street, and he wants to break it real bad.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote. And in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy. Back on the conversation. Joining me now is Tatenda Musapatike. She's a former Facebook staffer and founder of Voter Formation Project, which we're going to talk about in a sec. Tatenda, welcome to the TYT Network.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So before we get into the political project you're on, what did you do at Facebook?
I was a client solutions manager for Democratic Politics, which meant that I worked with folks on the left to help implement their ad buy strategies and try and resolve any technical issues they may have, and really acted as a voice of the industry to the company and the company back to the industry. So really worked closely with both the advertisers and then within Facebook to try and make sure that they were able to be successful with their ad buys.
Okay, now that job is challenging, but the job of Facebook overall, I think admittedly is very challenging. As we both have critiques of it, I want to acknowledge that it's not easy. So they had a policy that politicians were basically exempt from other regulations on Facebook because they wanted to be able, they didn't want to interfere with political speech. Another way of saying that is basically they would let politicians lie, because what could politicians ever do without being able to lie? And so they recently changed that and said that politicians will not be able to do that. But now they've got to go and fact check politicians, which is going to cause them big problems because the politicians are not going to be happy about it. So first, where do you stand on all that?
I have a view that I think from the start it was really important to make sure that all people who are on the platform were held accountable equally. While I can understand the idea that newsworthiness means that whatever the politicians may say on the platform may eventually end up in the public ecosystem, and so it may not be necessary for the platforms to say take that content off their pages. I do think at the end of the day, if we're going to say that we take the security and safety, especially of minority groups who are more affected by some of this language seriously, then we have to make sure that politicians are held accountable for their actions in the same way that any other person on the platform is, especially when politicians' discourse has much stronger ramifications and consequences for the things that they say and who they can possibly harm.
Yeah, so some of this is easy. So when Trump says, we did a story today about how Trump was pressing his Justice Department to interfere in the election process because he thought that Italy had fixed the elections. Okay, Italy did not fix the US elections. That's easy. That's an obvious, ridiculous lie, right? But it gets hard when you get closer to most of the things that politicians say. So Joe Manchin says that he votes against the HR1 basically for the People Act. He votes against $15 minimum wage. He votes to maintain the filibuster because that's what his voters want. Well, those are pretty demonstrable lies. All of those poll really, really well in West Virginia. And the reality is he's doing it for the benefit of his corporate donors. So is that a lie? Should Facebook do something about that?
That's a really interesting situation that you bring up, because I think it gets into the idea of removal in terms of pure truth or removal in terms of causing direct harm. And so in that instance, I think that the politician themselves could make a really strong case for the fact that they have heard directly from their constituents that they value, his bipartisanship efforts over the fact that they want freer, fairer elections. And so it would be hard for the platform to really say that we know that that's not true, especially when public polling opinion is often fraught and not exactly the most accurate science in terms of reflecting what people want. So in that instance, there's a strong case for the personal belief or reflecting personal conversations that may seem untrue to us, but could be a closely held truth for that person. So it is really difficult. But I think in that instance, the platforms will probably take into account direct harm for either directly democracy or society or individual groups of people.
Yeah, it's really tough. Look, I think that I'm very progressive and I can't stand Donald Trump. But if you listen to his speech that day, he said a couple of things like, hey, march down there, and was aggressive in his speech. But he never said break into the building, kill them, hurt them, etc. So why draw the line there on Trump?
I think it's a context issue. And this is something that we've seen also Facebook admit when they were talking about the situation for which when he's brought back on the platform that they will assess the context in which his platform will be put back up if it is. And so I think it's important to remember that while he didn't directly say, go break into the Capitol and kill people, he had for months and months and months been stoking a huge lie about the safety and fairness of our elections. He had been pushing a big lie about who dangerous people were in our society. He had been pushing a lot of rhetoric to encourage people to stand up against their government, encouraging people to take up arms, maybe not directly against the government, but saying, you need to be protecting yourselves. These people are your enemy. And when you call people your enemy and you support people having access to different kinds of arms and maybe are insinuating or strongly suggesting that you should take up potentially nonviolent or insurrectionist type behavior, then I think that also comes into play because it wasn't just the direct words. It had been months and months of context building up. And I think it's also important to note that even without the deaths, he still was sparking an idea that you needed to rise up against your government based on a falsehood, which is an insurrection despite violence, right? Like he was going there to force people to stop a normal democratic action, which at the end of the day is subverting our democracy, and why I think they took this, unprecedented steps that they took to remove that speech from the platform.
Yeah, I understand that. I think context is really important. I think it's a very good case for it. So Matt Gaetz, Lara Trump recently have both at a bare minimum have insinuated violence. Matt Gaetz was saying that people should use their Second Amendment rights and potentially against the government and potentially soon. So these are pretty close to direct incitement. And then Lara Trump just flat out said you should grab your guns and maybe take things into your own hands at the border. So what happens in a situation like that? If she said that on Facebook, I assume they would take that off, but does that get a ban? And if she doesn't say it on Facebook, does she not get banned?
So they're only going to regulate speech that is directly posted on the platform by those content producers, so the pages that post it. So that's step one. So they need to create an infraction from their own pages. The next thing that is important is that they do have a policy process and also the review board. And so I think they're trying to build a framework of rules around how politicians will have rules enforced that will become more apparent as they need to go through more and more enforcements. But the other thing about that language is that many people aren't aware that Facebook has two standards of policymaking, one for advertisers, which is more stringent than that for just organic content. And so I think it will be interesting for us to take a look to see if they'll start to take some of those more stringent rules for advertisers where, any kind of allusion to violence with guns is not permitted, and how they bridge the gap between what politicians say and if politicians put those things in ads, or if third-party groups take the words from Matt Gaetz or Lara Trump that you mentioned and put them into ads. I think that's something that we'll all need to watch really closely.
Got you. All right, what is the Voter Formation Project?
The Voter Formation Project is a new C3 that I founded this year that is designed to help Black and Brown and underserved communities register to vote and vote so that we're closing the disparity between these voters and their white counterparts. Our goal is to make sure that we are using digital tactics to reach all of these communities so that they're better able to advocate for the policies that will help them and ultimately express that at the ballot box.
So do you reach them through Facebook, and then do you direct them to specific actions?
Yes, so we use social media, different platforms for online advertising in order to try and reach folks directly. And then we will connect them with either video resources to give more information or links to their Secretary of State for them to directly register to vote. Or we have built technology that will help people make a plan to vote and then ultimately get reminders to do that. So we have a bunch of different ways that we are trying to make sure that people are aware of how they can become civically engaged, and also making sure that we're giving people information about why it's important. A lot of times groups will come in closer to elections and tell people to vote, but there isn't a lot of work being done to explain why it's important year round. And so what we're trying to do is really change attitudes about voting and about civic participation through constant engagement and social media and online education.
Okay, that's a good note to end on. Everybody check out Voter Formation Project. Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you.
How's it going?
Pretty damn good, pretty damn good. Yeah. I'm looking forward personally to our bonus episode where John will discuss his experience using a table saw for the first time. I know
that's table saw, actually.
My table saw.
Yes.
I mean, I love discussions about woodworking.
I have a new project, actually, and I probably will die before finishing it, but I want to at least get it out there so I'll get some credit after I die.
We're also gonna discuss the seriousness of T-ball games and how they can sometimes devolve into complete and utter madness, chaos, and violence. Now, of course, this is our bonus episode. It's not where we usually do hard news stories, but we do have a ton of important stories to get to in our main show, including The Intercept's incredible reporting on a call that Joe Manchin had with billionaire donors. They have obtained audio from this Zoom call, so we'll give you some snippets of that audio and give you all the details you need to know about that story. Later in the show, we're also going to, of course, discuss, some of the nonsense coming from people like Tucker Carlson in regard to the Capitol riots. And then what else? What else are we gonna discuss, John? Let me see. Amazon, that's what I've been wanting to tease.
Yeah, that one's a big one.
There's a huge Amazon expose that we're gonna get to in a little bit as well. But as always, I just want to encourage you guys to like and share the stream. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone. We want as many people engaging with us as possible because we love hearing from you guys. Use YouTube Super Chats to comment, or if you're a member, we read your comments as well during our social breaks. And of course, that's for our online audience. Now, without further ado, let's get to this unfortunate first story.
The IDF released images of their first airstrikes on Gaza since last month's ceasefire, which ended 11 days of deadly violence. Notably, though, for the first time in a dozen years, these airstrikes were ordered with an Israeli prime minister not called Netanyahu.
That's right. For anyone who was hoping that the removal of Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister of Israel would lead to some peace between the Israelis and Palestinians, unfortunately, you were misled into thinking that because we are now hearing about an increase in violence, certainly in response to what the Israeli military is referring to as incendiary balloons. Now, that sounds comical, but I'll give you all the details. You can judge for yourselves. So the helium-filled balloons, which were affixed with incendiary devices, were floated into Israel on Wednesday, both before and after the airstrikes. The IDF, the Israeli military, of course, says the balloons were launched as a protest to the provocative flag march in Jerusalem, where thousands of Israelis marched through the old city. In fact, I want to go to this video featuring Hadas Gold from CNN. She reports on the ground in Israel, and she helps to elaborate on what caused this flare-up in violence again in East Jerusalem. Take a look.
That yesterday, it wasn't just the balloons that were launched, there was the flag march that took place in Jerusalem. This is an annual march. It's usually attended by right-wing Jewish groups, and it takes place to celebrate when Israel took control of the Western Wall and East Jerusalem in the 1967 war. This march was supposed to take place last month on Jerusalem Day. It was canceled at the last minute when Hamas began firing rockets towards Jerusalem, of course, that helping to trigger that 11-day bloody conflict. So this march was rescheduled under Netanyahu's government. Naftali Bennett, his new government, one of their first moves was to actually just allow the march to take place as scheduled. There was a huge police presence because part of the march was expected to take place in front of Damascus Gate. This is the main entrance for Muslim worshippers into the old city. It's the one, it leads directly into the Muslim quarter of the old city. So it already was a provocative move to have these right-wing Jewish groups marching, dancing with the Israeli flag in this plaza in front of the gate. Now, the police did not allow them to enter the old city through the gate. They instead marched along the outside and entered through the Jaffa Gate. But I was there, they were heard chanting slogans such as "Jerusalem is ours, Jerusalem is our home." At one point, some of them were even chanting "Death to Arabs."
So that gives you some more details about some of the provocative moves by the ultra-conservative or ultra-nationalist, Israeli group marching through this neighborhood. Hamas preemptively with these incendiary balloons decided to retaliate, and of course they did the same with the balloons after the fact. But I mean, look, I'm not justifying what Hamas did with the balloons. Obviously, that was wrong. But I also don't want to make the mistake that sometimes happens in the media where people draw these false equivalencies. Clearly, balloons with incendiary devices are very different from full-blown airstrikes.
How? I don't understand any distinction between those.
It shouldn't even have to be said, right? But I'm sure that there are some dishonest actors who try to pretend like they can't tell the difference, but clearly there's a difference. Here's the good thing though. Luckily, no one died from the airstrikes, no one died from the balloons, but there was one death unrelated to the airstrikes and balloons, which I'll get to in just a minute. But John, jump in.
Yes, look, I'm being sarcastic because I'm angry about the way that the media talks about this. I've talked for a long time about how annoyed I get every single time I see when there's a flare-up in violence. You already know what the headlines and subheadlines are gonna be. X rockets were fired, and then Y Palestinians were killed. So you can count the dead when Israel attacks Palestine. There's nothing equivalent when the Palestinians attack Israel, so that's why they just say how many shots they fired. Okay, you never say how many missiles were fired from Israel because you don't need to. You can just count the dead because they're that effective. And so that's why it's not to say that these balloons aren't dangerous. They do set fire to buildings. It is entirely conceivable that someone could die as a result of them. But it is still a balloon that's being used. And if you think that they're the same, okay, swap. If it's the same, then you take the balloons and you give them the missiles. No, obviously is it very, very different. And briefly, I just want to mention one additional thing. Hadas Gold there, I think most of what she said was perfectly fine, said the march was initially delayed because Hamas fired rockets at Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That's not why it was delayed at all.
You're
I'm not to say that wasn't a part of the story eventually, but Palestinians were brutalized. Al-Aqsa Mosque was basically invaded by security forces. I just love, it's just like Jake Tapper before. It's this, can we wait a year before we rewrite history totally to make the Palestinians the 100% villains? You're really gonna jump on that right now?
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that because I wanted to comment on that as well. And it wasn't just the raiding of Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was also as a result of Palestinians being forced out of their homes and evicted in Sheikh Jarrah. There was also the fact that during the month of Ramadan, the religious activity of Palestinians in Jerusalem were significantly restricted. So all of those provocations and all of those restrictions led to the horrible situation that we saw, the violence and aggression toward Palestinians over those 11 days that were referenced in that video. Now, I do want to talk a little more about that flag march because I was hoping that they would just kind of let the flag march go, after canceling it earlier, but no, they didn't, and they decided to do the march. And so, as was reported during the flag march, Israeli police in riot gear blocked surrounding streets, forcibly removing Palestinian protesters from the route. 33 Palestinian protesters were injured, including by stun grenade, rubber bullets, and live fire, with 6 evacuated to hospital following clashes with Israeli security forces around East Jerusalem, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society said. Also, Hamas and other militant groups in Gaza did not immediately respond to with rocket fire into Israel. And I think that's important. They did retaliate after the missile strikes, but they did so with the incendiary balloons, right? But the situation along the Israel-Gaza border remains extremely tense, and the possibility of an imminent and serious escalation cannot be ruled out. And listen, I mean, when you think about the conditions that Palestinians are currently facing in Gaza, in this open-air prison, we have these discussions about Israel having the right to defend itself, but imagine if you're in this in these conditions, if you're held in these conditions where it's difficult to get humanitarian aid, where your future is uncertain, where you have no freedom, where you really have no real autonomy because everything you do is dictated by the Israeli government, right? And so it's important to talk about the asymmetrical nature of all of this, both politically and also when it comes to military capability and defense capability. Clearly, Israel has far more than the Palestinians do in terms of being able to protect themselves. And I think that does oftentimes get left out of the conversation, with the exception of the 11 days of violence that we had covered about a month ago. That was when the tide kind of started to turn in the media and the way that they were covering it. Now, there was one Palestinian woman who was shot and killed as a result of some of these protests in response to the flag march. Let's take a look at that.
Earlier in the day, at least 17 Palestinians were arrested as they protested the ultra-nationalist Israeli March of the Flags taking place in occupied East Jerusalem. Some participants in that march chanted "Death to Arabs" and "May your village burn down." This is Palestinian legal activist and protester Farid Al-Atrash.
They should stop all the acts by the Israeli occupation and the settlers by entering Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the capital of the Palestinian state. We're telling Jerusalem and the Jerusalem residents that you're not alone, and there should be an end to all this aggression by the Israeli occupation in front of the whole world.
So that video, of course, detailed a little more about the flag march and the aftermath of that. But the video that I was referring to is this one, which gives you some more details about the Palestinian woman who was shot and killed.
Forces shot dead a Palestinian woman in a town northeast of Jerusalem earlier today. She was identified as 29-year-old Maya Fana, a doctoral student. The Israeli military claimed she attempted to ram her car into a group of soldiers. Local media report no ambulance was sent to care for her after she was shot. The killing came the day after Israel launched overnight air raids on Gaza for the first time since a ceasefire with Hamas was declared in May, following a brutal 11-day bombardment of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And look, running your car into a crowd of people is obviously wrong, and it's going to be met with brutal force, and that's exactly what happened. As far as we know from the reporting,
assuming that's what happened.
Assuming, yes, exactly, and that's an important thing. Look, that's how it's being reported. We're not on the ground. We don't know for sure. So obviously, that's an important caveat. But all of this violence, all of it doesn't need to happen. That's the problem. There's absolutely no desire on the Israeli side to genuinely engage in negotiations over, creating really following through on a two-state solution. There's never going to be a one-state solution. I think this situation is too far gone, and it's too. I just think it's impossible at this point, right? I mean, even the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel are treated as second-class citizens. It's wrong. It's wrong.
But Bennett explicitly doesn't want one.
Exactly.
And Biden, maybe if you pressed him, might say he's in favor of it, but I don't know. That's like most of his priorities. It's like you have to dig to try to get to them, and that's the thing too. Like, I mean, the timing of this. Okay, with the march and all that, maybe that's what it's all about, or maybe. The new government would have found some way to come out the gate swinging, saying, okay, no, Netanyahu's gone, but this is still the situation. This is the status quo. I don't know, it reminds me of when Trump went in office. Really quickly after he was inaugurated, we had that disastrous mission, I believe it was into Yemen. We had the deployment of the Moabs in Afghanistan. Like people want to show, no, I'm just as bloodthirsty as the guy that came before me. And so that's my fear. Now, we had heard in the wake of Bennett forming that coalition government that Biden saying this is going to be an opportunity for a new relationship. I don't know, it looks pretty much like the old one, honestly.
It is.
And what I understand Biden's doing stuff abroad or whatever. You could ask him about this. Does he care? Does he have thoughts?
But that's the thing. I think that first off, the Israeli government really has, in their minds, no incentive to push for a solution. And the Biden administration, and not just the Biden administration, the US government overall hasn't provided an incentive. They haven't provided carrots or sticks, right? In fact, they get carrots no matter what. The Israeli government gets help from the United States in the form of weapons sales, military funding, foreign aid on a yearly basis, all of that help, and it's pretty much unconditional. There's nothing attached to that indicating that the United States is either demanding, even suggesting that the Israeli government, in a sincere and genuine way, engage in negotiations for a two-state solution. And that's a problem. So this violence is gonna continue. And the reason why what we're seeing today really seems as though it's gonna be no different from what we experienced during the, during Netanyahu and his leadership is because Naftali Bennett, the new prime minister, is actually in some ways, maybe even more extreme than Netanyahu was. In the past, Bennett has pushed former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take a tougher stance against Hamas and the launching of incendiary balloons. Okay, so he doesn't think that Netanyahu went far enough. As you mentioned, he certainly does not believe in a one-state solution, not even close. And he was critical of Netanyahu from the right of him. Now, this new government is a coalition government. Yes, it has some Arab representation for the first time in the history of the Israeli government. But that is a very fragile coalition that's been bound by one thing and one thing only: ousting Netanyahu. Now that Netanyahu's been ousted, anyone who thinks that, there's gonna be a more moderate approach to this conflict, I think is mistaken.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have a bunch of foreign policy stories to get to. I'm sorry, domestic policy stories to get to. So why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss that leaked audio featuring Joe Manchin and his discussion with billionaire donors. Welcome to our first social break of the day. Just wanted to remind you all that we are looking for your Twitch pitch. See what we did there with that little rhyme, try to make it a little more enticing. So go to tyt.com/Twitch pitch for all the information on this. What we're doing is we're looking for hosts for our Twitch channel because look, to be quite honest with you guys, I think the best hosts are people who have not been trained to be robots in the news. And I've seen some of the submissions, including this wonderful, wonderful submission from someone who sang a great song.
I haven't seen this one.
Yeah, it's just great. Anyway, thank you so much for all the submissions already. But you can learn more about this if you're interested in putting your name in the hat to be a Twitch host by going to tyt.com/Twitch pitch.
This is like bringing you back to the TYTU days.
It is. That's how we got John, guys. We had a new show called TYT University years and years and years ago, and John had the best submissions. And
now you can replace me. So that's good.
Definitely not looking to replace John. We're looking to expand, guys, and that's what I love about TYT. It's not just about one or two people doing one thing and that's it. It's about, it's about building a movement, providing a platform for different voices to speak their minds. It's really exciting stuff, so I'm looking forward to it. All right, also, there's the Economic Justice Town Hall. It's an Ohio event, and I don't know, you might have heard of her. Nina Turner will be there, Killer Mike will be there, and this guy that I'm not that familiar with, Cenk Uygur, will also be there. So it's on June 26th, and you can definitely check it out. It's in Cleveland, Ohio. But to learn more about this event, please go to tyt.com/events to see if maybe you can take part in it and hear this important conversation. I'm super excited about Nina Turner for obvious reasons. And one more programming note for you all. Juneteenth. This is Friday, June 18th. We're gonna host our 3rd annual Juneteenth special. The first hour is hosted by Ben Dixon, and then J.R. Jackson will host the 2nd hour, and we have so many wonderful guests to take part in this important conversation. So please check that out, Friday, June 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. All right, and let me go ahead and read as many comments as I can before we have to get back to the show. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders wanted to chime in on the Israel report that we just did. I find that report massively suspect. A doctoral student is going to randomly try to run over people in their car. By the way, would have been legal in Florida. Thank you for mentioning that point about Florida. And yeah, look, I was trying to find more information about it because I don't want to just base our reporting on it on what CNN said or what one outlet
or what the
said.
military says.
Or what the military said, exactly. But I haven't been able to find any other details about it. If you guys happen to come across those details, please send them to me because I do want to learn more about it. Colorado Blue Blazer, clearly the Israeli government is anxious to kick off a general religious war twixt Islam and the Jews, but using the US as its everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. John, I'm sure you are itching to hear some leaked audio of Joe Manchin.
Okay, if it makes him look bad, I'll take a listen.
I think it does, but you guys can judge for yourself. So let's get to this next story. The Intercept has obtained audio of conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin and a call he had with billionaire donors. Now, it's honestly a rare glimpse into how our system of legalized bribery works, and honestly what Manchin's calculations are in regard to domestic policy and some of the ridiculous public statements he's made, speaking out against the agenda that Biden has put forth in the name of bipartisanship. Now, we all know that bipartisanship is ridiculous considering the fact that Republicans have failed to pass any legislation along with Democrats. Even when it came to the Capitol Hill riots and a commission to investigate them, Manchin couldn't get the 10 Republican senators necessary to vote in favor of that. So Republicans were able to block that effort using the legislative filibuster in the Senate. So he's been getting a lot of heat, and I've been wondering if he's noticed all that heat. He has, and he's trying to work with these billionaire donors to get these leftists off his back. Now, let me give you a few details before we get to these video clips. The meeting was hosted by the group No Labels, a big money operation co-founded by former Senator Joe Lieberman that funnels high net worth donor money to conservative Democrats and moderate Republicans. Manchin told the assembled donors that he needed help flipping a handful of Republicans from no to yes on the January 6th commission in order to strip the far left of their best argument against the filibuster. The January 6th commission got 56 votes. Of course, 4 short of the 60 needed to overcome the filibuster. A thorough embarrassment for those like Manchin who claim bipartisanship is still possible in the divided Senate chamber. Now, I do want to get to some of these clips, beginning with Lee Fong, who's one of the Intercept reporters who's done a fantastic job with this report and many others over at the Intercept. I highly recommend his work. He's about to talk about what the objectives are of this meeting.
The call opens with Nancy Jacobson. This is one of the founders of No Labels, who's helped found the so-called Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress, bringing together these moderate members, real mover and shaker in Washington. And she's basically laying out some hard-nosed politics, saying that the reason we have influence is because we can raise serious dollars, and we're going to basically dispense this money to make sure that people who agree with us can't be pushed by either extreme or any special interest, that they are given the political leeway to preserve the filibuster, to kind of preserve the policies and rules that they favor. And she basically lays out along with Andrew Bursky, the head of another private equity fund in Connecticut, who's an executive board member of No Labels. The two of them, Jacobson and Bursky, are talking about how they need to raise money and dispense campaign checks, keep their allies in Congress.
All right, so Lee Fang sets it up perfectly. That's what the purpose of this meeting is. That's what the purpose of No Labels is. They want to ensure that the left wing, and I'm sure they pretend the right wing as well, but mostly the left wing has very little say or sway within the Democratic Party, and certainly when it comes to the passage of domestic policy. And so, John, before we get to the founder of No Labels and what she's dangling in front of the likes of Joe Manchin, do you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I mean, a lot about this is already ridiculous. Yeah, it's not even. You're right. It's more about stopping the left than theoretically the right. But really, it's not even ideological necessarily. It's just preserve the tools necessary to stop anything from significant from ever being passed. And if you think, you know what we should do? Oh God, let's get some stuff that seems like it should be really easy. Like, come on, a Capitol Commission.
Right.
We should be able to get that. I mean, after all, they attacked the Capitol. Let's do that, and then that will show that the left is ridiculous in thinking that we need to get rid of the filibuster. When really, none of those donors care about the commission. Whether it happens, whether it doesn't happen, they care about things that affect their bank accounts. And so, but then on top of it, it didn't even work.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to deprive us of our best weapon. Okay, well, I still got my best weapon here. Bipartisanship is a scam. You don't actually believe in it. It's not actually going to work to deliver any solutions for working Americans. So then we can get rid of the filibuster, right? Because this was the test. Joe Manchin, Sinema said, we can get 10 good Republicans. You couldn't, you're not going to. You couldn't for something so obvious, so common sense. You're obviously not going to, nor do you care to for anything like the infrastructure bill as HR 1 or whatever.
Right, yeah, I mean, look, again, like you're absolutely right about that. It really,
Don't call any of this a bribe though.
No, exactly.
The checks aren't a bribe, the jobs later aren't a bribe. None of it's a bribe, it's just intended to bribe them, that's all.
Exactly. Now there are some questions about some portions of this meeting and whether or not what Manchin suggests breaks some laws. Yes, believe it or not, even in the system of legalized bribery, there are certain things that politicians could do that could be considered illegal regarding money in politics. We'll get to that in just a minute.
There's a quote that I don't even think it's an edge case.
I know, but you think
he's telling them to bribe a senator?
Yes, we're gonna get to that.
No, we're good. I'm not gonna say what it is.
Playing
it's
the
not
role
a spoiler.
of Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola.
No, I know. I said I can see it's right there.
No,
You're gonna read it, but it's bribery. That's all it is.
It is absolutely.
Here, I'll read it.
No,
I'm kidding. Okay, go.
All right, so Lee Fang sets it up. You get an idea of what the true objective of this Zoom call is. Without further ado, let's go to the founder of No Labels, this group of billionaire donors who want to keep everything the same.
The truth is there's no other group in the center that's putting the hard dollars together. And so you may see these big numbers with the campaigns, but that's a lot of soft dollars. It's a lot of super PACs. It's things they don't control. They love the hard dollars. And we'd be hard pressed to think of any other group that can raise that sort of money. Our hope is at least 20 million over the cycle with this group, and then hopefully keep doubling it, as we go. So, we're waiting, right, Andy? I mean, we're gonna see what happens with this next vote, and we want to reward those people that get to party solutions.
It's just so disgusting. Okay, so let me decode a few of these statements. So she talks about hard money, so much so it makes you a little uncomfortable. And then she talks about soft money. So soft money is, essentially super PACs, dark money funding politicians. Hard money is individual donors, right? And there are more limits in terms of the amount of money you can contribute as an individual donor. I think at this point it's about $2,800 per candidate. So the reason why politicians like the hard dollars is because it gives you this illusion that they're funded by small dollar donations, right? And so it helps to, I guess, deflect or hide the fact that a lot of these politicians are actually, funded by dark money. And hard dollars, I think, give them an opportunity to just, I don't know, make their image look better than it really is.
Yeah, and they want to report on the massive fundraising totals.
That's right.
They definitely like that. Also, they have more direct control over how it's actually used, so they can route it to the right consultants that they want, the right firms that they want. I mean, it's sort of a blurry line, because with the dark money, there's not supposed to be any coordination, which is why you get things like the McConnelling that we mocked years ago. But we know that they're still working together.
Exactly. And the reason why I chose that clip was so you can get a sense of how the bribery really works, right? She's mentioning figures there, like actual numbers there. And remember, Senator Joe Manchin is on that call. And so when she mentions the $20 million, when she mentions that money and the legalized bribery, she doesn't say legalized bribery, but she's implying it. That's the kind of stuff that entices politicians, whether they're on the right or the left, to just keep things the same or to be incredibly ineffective politicians that who do not serve the best interests of their constituents. And we know that Senator Joe Manchin certainly has not done that. Yeah,
and really fast, like they have multiple layers of it. Manchin would vote against most of this. Manchin doesn't want to have to vote against most of this.
Exactly.
So they would aggressively oppose our interests, but they'd prefer to just be like, well, what can we do? I was stopped from helping you, I guess. It amounts to the same thing, but it's harder to convince people of what's going on when they're protected by these procedural maneuvers, arcane Senate rules, and things like that, the procedure.
Now, what you're about to hear is Senator Joe Manchin, who has a suggestion in regard to a Republican Senator, Roy Blunt. And what he wants to do is persuade Roy Blunt to change his vote on forming a January 6th commission to investigate the Capitol riots. And there's a very specific reason why he wants that. Take a listen.
Right now, what I'm asking for, I need to go back. I need to find 3 more good Republican senators that'll vote for the commission, so that at least we can tamp them down to what people said Republicans won't even do the simple lift. Common sense of basically voting to do a commission that was truly bipartisan. So once that people, and it just really emboldens the far left, saying, I showed you, how's that bipartisan working for you now, Joe? Those are the hard things. That's where I need help, Dan.
That's where I need help, man.
So how's it working out for him?
It's not working out at all. It's not working out at all, which is why he's trying to get these billionaire donors to entice Roy Blunt with legalized bribery, okay, or possibly illegal bribery, which we'll get to in just a minute.
Okay, I'll spoil it.
But exactly, but to basically convince him to vote in favor of the January 6th commission, not because Manchin thinks the January 6th commission is important. He might think it's important, but really the real purpose here is to pass legislation in the Senate through this filibuster, right? Like you don't have to throw the filibuster out. You can possibly get the 10 Republicans needed to vote yes on that legislation. And if they do, that's when Manchin gets to point to that piece of legislation that passes in the Senate and say, you see that? We can do things through bipartisanship, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. And in reality, at the end of the day, his #1 goal is to protect money in politics. I mean, everything that he's done so far has made that abundantly clear, especially when it comes to HR 1, that's the For the People Act, the election reform bill. The reason why he's put out his own version of it, an incredibly, slimmed down, flimsy version of it, is because his version doesn't include anything about campaign finance.
Yeah.
It keeps money in politics.
And the Republicans don't even support that.
Exactly.
The slimmed down version. Yeah. Like there's a lot that's revealed in these videos that are great, and thank you to the Intercept for making sure that people see it. But one of the more subtle things is, and you alluded to this, do you get the impression that he cares if they fail in setting up the commission? Like it is just a means to an end. I need to demonstrate to the far left that this isn't necessary. Now, if I don't demonstrate that getting rid of the filibuster isn't necessary, I'll come up with something else. I'm not gonna change my mind. It's not like we're actually doing an experiment. Can there be bipartisanship on what I'm calling a truly bipartisan commission? And we will find out. If they will work with us, then we can have more faith that we can do more things together in the future. And if they don't, then maybe the left was onto something. There's none of that. There's no concern about the commission. There's no concern about the process. It's just strategy. And it's because he doesn't have to care about literally anything, any bill that they're gonna debate, any bill that could theoretically be proposed. He is rich and mediocre and comfortable with the status quo, and he's gonna be fine no matter what, because Joe Lieberman's buddies are gonna give him a job or give him money. They're gonna protect him from primary challenges. If he ever gets knocked out, he's gonna earn 10 times as much as a lobbyist. He's gonna be perfectly fine. Don't elect people like Joe Manchin, where the quality of their life, none of it depends on what they do or don't do.
That's exactly right. And that's what stood out to me the most, not just about this particular story, but about politicians scheming to keep their position of power. Because what's the whole point of having that position of power? I guess there are two possible objectives, and what we're seeing represented in Congress overall is just this self-preservation for profits, for power's sake. I mean, they certainly don't want to use their power to change the country, reform things, and make people's lives materially better. All of the scheming that takes place behind the scenes is about self-preservation, job opportunities should they no longer serve in Congress. And in fact, you know what? Why don't we get to that point? Because this is the moment that John's been waiting for, and I'm sure you'll be interested in this. So what exactly is Senator Manchin suggesting, right? Is he suggesting campaign contributions to Roy Blunt, or is there something else at play? Well, regarding Blunt, Manchin appears to be suggesting, without perhaps quite explicitly saying so, that the wealthy executives on the call could dangle future financial opportunities in front of the outgoing senator, because remember, he's retiring, he's not gonna run for re-election. Outgoing senator, while lobbying him to change his vote. Senate ethics rules forbid future job negotiations if they create a conflict of interest or present even the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Did we have the actual quote?
Go ahead.
What he actually said?
Go ahead. I don't have it in a graphic.
Oh, really?
I don't think.
This blue one? What's in blue?
Oh, I do have it, my bad. We don't have a graphic for it, but I'll read it for you. So he says, Roy is retiring. If some of you all who might be working with Roy in his next life could tell him, that'd be nice and it'd help our country. That would be very good to get him to change his vote. And we're going to have another vote on this thing. That'll give me one more shot at it, so.
Yeah, so for those of you who might be working with him, that might convince him to change his vote.
Yeah.
That's get him a job so he'll change, promise him a job if he changes his vote. There is not a lick of difference between that and a bribe. That's what a bribe is. That's, take it up with Merriam-Webster if you'd like to, but that's a bribe right there. How they hide behind things that are supposed to kick up a little bit of mud, like sand, and make it a little bit obscured or whatever. They're supposed to say, no, we don't give them the donation to change their vote. We just reward the politicians that give us what we want. And generally, that's a safe bet because they know we get Joe Manchin, he's never going to do a damn thing. Just keep him in office, it'll be totally fine. It's a lockdown vote. But you can't say to change their vote, that's just bribery. And you're right, it's probably against Senate ethics rules. How is it not a federal crime?
Yeah.
I understand that this is a battle that TYT has been waging for longer than I've even been here, but I don't understand why you're gonna even pretend that bribery is illegal when you allow what's going on right there. So you can give them direct money, but at least there it's for their campaign. Sometimes they find ways to spend it for themselves, but at least it's not personally for them. This is 100% money that would be going to an individual senator if he changes his vote to achieve a short-term political goal. Lock him up. Make an example of him, lock him up.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that this is a possible ethics violation as opposed to a federal crime, because it should be a federal crime for all the reasons that you just mentioned, but also, what's the Senate Ethics Committee, which is made up of senators who are also into legalized bribery? What are they gonna do? Right, remember when there was clear evidence of insider trading happening in the Senate?
Yeah.
In the Senate, and the Senate Ethics Committee is like, insider trading, let's see. So there was confidential briefing on coronavirus. Immediately after that, several senators decided to sell stocks that could be harmed by the coronavirus pandemic. And we see nothing wrong.
Buy ones that would benefit during a pandemic.
Exactly, we don't see anything wrong.
Doesn't look like anything to me.
No, it's totally fine.
Nope, she comes running out of the briefing room, sell! No, that's totally fine. She's just, she had that on her to-do list, I guess.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Surely the Senate Ethics Committee will save us, he said as he died.
Listen, please check out this wonderful reporting over at The Intercept. There's other details that we just don't have the time to get to, but I can't plug this particular story enough. Please read those details. And of course, help support The Intercept. They do great work, great investigative journalism, and I absolutely love that. So without further ado, let's go to our break. And when we come back, I will tell you about this insane Amazon expose in the New York Times. Yes, they do some pretty good reporting, even though sometimes their takes are not so great. So you don't want to miss the details on that and more when we come back. Hey everyone, welcome back to our social break. I just read a comment. I don't know if it was from our members or from Super Chats, but it was in the lower part of the screen. And it said something like, soft money also makes me uncomfortable, just to kind of equalize things. You're right, yes, yeah. All of it. All right, so Gabby Marita in our member section says, is Anna going to yeet John from the studio in the second hour so we can get some solo Salt Queen tonight? Gabby, I absolutely love you, but we should be giving John a lot of love because the original plan was for me to do the show the first hour alone, but John was kind enough to co-host with me because I was just in the mood to have a co-host. Like, you know.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, and you know, John's my news buddy.
Yeah.
And buddy overall. All right, let's go to another Gabby Marita comment from our member section. Why is bipartisanship considered such a worthy goal in politics? Even when Republicans do agree to occasional bipartisanship, the bills they sign onto definitely still sucks. Well, that's the point. It's not, I mean, the takeaway from that story we just did should be that bipartisanship isn't even something that Manchin really cares about. Yeah. But bipartisanship, or that talking point regarding bipartisanship, allows him to avoid having to vote on bold legislation, right? It gives him an out from having to make tough decisions as someone who was elected into the Senate to serve the best interests of people in West Virginia. He hasn't been doing that because this system is set up in such a way that they can do all these maneuvers and all this trick and use legalized bribery to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, they just set up these fake obstacles. It has to be bipartisan, it can't cost anything. That never applies under Republicans for literally anything that they do. But when it's a Democratic administration, those are things that the media is always going to demand to stop anything from being done.
Exactly. Moving over to our super chats, No Human Humanists or Non-Human Humanist says, I enjoy pretty much the nuanced and well-researched journalism of Anna. John is cool as well. Also, go Dragon Squad, love you all. John is very well-researched, let me just say.
Thank you.
Which is why he can do this show with me last minute. He wasn't gonna do the first hour with me today. I literally asked him 15 minutes before going live. And he's ready, he can comment on anything because he does his research, whether he's gonna cover that story or not.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ted Cruz.
I knew you were gonna say that, I've researched it.
Ted Cruz, Wedgie Dragon says, hugs and hearts to John, Anna, and Cenk and TYT, thank you so much. Ray Turner, AKA the Bearded Dragon, John, Anna, Cenk, and TYT strong, thank you, thank you. Bernie's effing Mittens says, greetings Lady Salt Dragon and Sir Dragon Daddy, thank you for giving us actual progressive news, you're the best. Also, Lauren Boebert is diarrhea. I agree, I guess. She will be making an appearance on the show later, not literally, but in a story.
Can you imagine?
I can.
Power panel with Lauren Boebert.
You never know, you never know.
Yeah.
We gotta get back to the show though, see you there. Welcome back, Anna and John with you. Everyone check out Damage Report, one of our many shows on the TYT network, and support each other, love each other. Love you guys. All right, let's get to our next story. An expose in the New York Times, which I think was actually pretty good. You guys should check it out for yourselves, but I'll give you all the relevant details right now. So, the New York Times did an expose into the business practices over at Amazon, the treatment of workers, especially in warehouses. And they specifically zeroed in on the one and only massive warehouse in New York, where the working conditions honestly make you think of what workers are treated in an underdeveloped country, undeveloped country, whichever phrase you'd like to use. It's just absolutely deplorable, disgusting behavior, of course meant to maximize profits, while cutting losses and costs. Now, what they specifically talked about is how Amazon relies on computerized human resources, and they encourage high turnover. And there's a terrible reason for why Jeff Bezos thinks high turnover is a good thing. That success, speed, and agility were possible because Amazon and its founder, Jeff Bezos, had pioneered new ways of mass managing people through technology, relying on a maze of systems that minimized human contact to grow unconstrained. Now, I could read graphics to you, but I think it's actually better to hear from one of the New York Times reporters who worked on this story. So without further ado, let's go to Jodi Kantor, who explains the findings in this report.
It all goes back to the original vision that Jeff Bezos had for this company. And we quoted actually some brave former executives who went on the record with us to describe his philosophy and express their concerns about how it's playing out. He wanted quick turnover because he wanted people when they were fresh and new. He felt that to paraphrase him, he almost felt that human beings were inherently lazy. And so he wanted to keep people moving through his system, and also intentionally limited upward mobility in the warehouses. It's very hard to start at the first level at Amazon and then progress up very high. Some of those executives are actually worried that Amazon could run out of workers because they are burning through workers so quickly.
So on one hand, this man thinks that workers are just inherently lazy, but he has literally intentionally created a work environment where it's impossible to strive for a better position, right? Because he has decided to stunt any upward mobility. That's what the business model is. He wants high turnover. He wants people to be fresh. I mean, I've been at TYT for over 14 years. And I would argue that I haven't shown any
lack of freshness.
I mean, I would like to think that, right?
That's how I'd put it.
I do my job every day with curiosity, excitement, and like that. Just think about how he thinks about ordinary people, about workers. He just thinks that they're beneath him, that they're lazy.
How bad does this guy want to replace every person in there with a robot? And I already feel terrible for how he's going to treat those robots someday, because he's going to work them into the ground. Yeah, he doesn't care. They are at best cogs in the machine, temporary. He wants to get rid of them. They can phrase it as the wanting to keep them fresh. What that means is we're gonna grind them down, and we could not do that. Like, we could try to care a little bit more about their quality of life, reduce the rate that they're expected to perform, give them a bit more break time, perhaps a little bit more money, a little bit time off work. We can do that stuff so they can maintain their freshness, but we're not interested in that. We wanna grind them to the ground because we know there's gonna be more people, and we can sustain that for a couple of decades before we worry that we've literally worked through all of the American workforce. And there's nobody desperate enough for this position that doesn't already have PTSD over the experience of having previously worked in one of our warehouses. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, the story gets worse, John, as you can imagine. And keep in mind that Amazon is aggressively anti-union for a reason. Because all these business practices would need to change if there was actually labor power amongst its workers, right? And so I want you to keep that all in mind as we give you more and more details about what this expose uncovered. Now, even before the pandemic, previously unreported data shows Amazon lost about 3% of its hourly associates each week, meaning the turnover among its workforce was roughly 150% a year. That rate almost double that of retail and logistics industries. Now, John seemed a little skeptical of that figure.
Well, I just want to make sure that people don't think that that means they go through more than their whole workforce every year. That's not what it means. They're going through the same portion roughly multiple times per year.
Exactly, yes. Now, I also want to give you a statement from a former vice president of Amazon who spoke to the New York Times for this story. And by the way, they spoke to 200 people who had worked at Amazon, are currently working at Amazon in order to do this story, including some former executives like David Newkirk, who says, David Newkirk, a former Amazon vice president who built the warehouse human resources operations, said that some problems stemmed from ideas the company had developed when it was much smaller. Bezos did not want an entrenched workforce, calling it, quote, a march to mediocrity. Newkirk recalled and saw low-skilled jobs as relatively short-term. So again, speaking to the issues with high turnover over at Amazon. And here's a direct quote from him. He says, "It is just a numbers game in many ways. The culture gets lost." So whenever you hear about company culture, they don't care about company culture. They don't, like when you hear about remote workers being forced to go back to the office, like we want to maintain company culture. No, they want to keep an eye on you.
Well, I want people to come back here because I actually am lonely here and I would like the culture to return. I want people to go to a food truck with me. I also want the food trucks to come back. But in big companies, I get what you're saying and I agree. Also, I'm not in charge by that. I want to make that very clear. It's not up to me. I'm just lonely. It's a big building and I'm here alone.
John.
Yeah, thanks.
He's a good guy. All right, well, then there's the topic of tracking, something that has been covered before, but we have a little more insight into that by Cantor. Let's watch.
Part of what the article lays bare and makes very clear is how well Amazon tracks its own employees. Not only the packages, but it tracks things like time off task. What does that kind of tracking do to the culture at Amazon?
So it is true that in most of these jobs in the warehouse, you are tracked every single second. When you pause, a computer is noting that. It's almost like an attendance system within an attendance system. Now, you may have an excused reason for pausing, but you have to go to your manager and ask them to code that in. We write about a woman named Diana Santos, who was an excellent performer. She had lots of praise. She had one really bad day in which a series of things, some of which were beyond her control, went wrong. She was fired for one bad day.
So if you need to take a break, I mean, you're being monitored every second that you're in that warehouse. If you need to step away for a second, you need to contact a manager. But here's the problem. It's really hard to get in touch with the manager because they've computerized and automated a lot of that, including their human resources department, which I'll give you some details about in just a second. But
yeah, and all of the human managers are so mediocre and unfresh. They've been marched into this position where it's ridiculous. The fact that it's assumed that it's not an acceptable pause and that you have to fix it is just insane. I know that a lot of people last year were really disappointed by the Cyberpunk game that came out, but dude, we don't need the video game. It's here, it's in these warehouses, it's huge, it's politically influential. The richest supervillain in world history is in charge of it right now, and it is amazing that, well, it's not amazing, campaign finance and all that our government doesn't care to actually get involved, that you have a couple of politicians who will speak out in favor of those trying to unionize. You have Amazon begrudgingly ceding to things like the conversation around $15 an hour minimum wage. So that's like the one good thing that's come to Amazon in literally years, thanks to groups like Fight for 15 and politicians like Bernie Sanders. But the issue is that, I guess, okay, it's good, you're gonna make $15 an hour, but how long could you possibly last? When we were watching that video, we said we wouldn't last 5 minutes there. You are treated as if it is unfortunate that you are a flesh and blood thing that has a brain that sometimes gets tired, that sometimes needs to urinate. These are inconveniences that eventually Amazon will work around. But for now, I guess we'll deal with it. But if you pause for a second, you might potentially lose your job as a result of that. Under those conditions, does it matter that you're making $50 an hour? Kind of, but it's not the biggest thing in the world, not like for other sorts of jobs.
They treat people like robots because they want them to work like robots, and since humans aren't robots, they're being replaced by robots. I mean, there's a very clear reason why there's so much investment into automating these jobs. So let's go to the final video, because this one helps to really humanize what's going on. You know, we talk about the numbers, the statistics, the business model, but I think it's important to talk about specific people and what they've gone through.
One of the most poignant stories in the article is about a woman named Ann Castillo. Her husband was a very long time, very loyal, well-liked Amazon employee. He got very sick with coronavirus. He suffered brain damage. His condition is very serious. And yet she had these questions about, why is the company, like, did they even know what is happening to my husband? And it led her to ask, are their workers truly replaceable to them?
And the answer is yes. In fact, just to give you some more details about Castillo and what her husband has gone through, workers like Mr. Castillo at JFK 8, that's the warehouse in New York, were told to take as much unpaid time as they needed, and this is after they test positive for COVID, then hit with mandatory overtime. When Amazon offered employee flexible personal leave, the system handling them jammed, issuing a blizzard of job abandonment notices to workers and sending staff scrambling to save them, according to human resources and warehouse employees. And one of the issues that Castillo's wife had was just getting in touch with someone over at HR, to ask questions about the benefits that are supposed to be provided. At one point, the workers' comp benefits just stopped being mailed to her house. And she was like, what's going on? She needed to get in touch with someone, and it was impossible to do it, right? So not only are warehouse workers slowly but surely getting replaced by these robots, and I know that if there isn't something done, if there isn't an increase in labor power, if there isn't organizing, if there isn't a union drive specifically in these big companies, then we're gonna continue, the situation will continue devolving. There's no question about it. I wanna just go to this one headline, and it was published by GeekWire in February, but it's relevant to what the argument that I'm trying to make right now. So Amazon now employs 1.3 million people worldwide after adding 500,000 workers in 2020. So during the pandemic, they really expanded. Obviously, that's worldwide, but we have about 1 million of those employees here in the United States. It's the second largest private employer. So when we
Walmart, I assume?
Walmart is still #1, believe it or not. So I bring that up because it's great when small companies unionize. Like, there's obviously, I want everyone to have power in their workplace. But in terms of like changing the country, like having the biggest impact on working conditions, we gotta focus on organizing and getting Amazon workers to push harder to form a union.
Well, and to get the support that they need, because obviously they have in some places, but they'll fire you if you get distracted for a minute. Like if they have a sniff that you're gonna be unionizing, they'll fire you immediately.
Yep.
So absolutely devastating. And really, are we doing another story? Or do we have a couple minutes?
We'll do another story, but go ahead.
Okay, we're not gonna break in a second?
No.
Okay, well, really fast, I just wanted to mention, when they said, take all the time you want off, but then there's issues and what do you know, we can't fix it or whatever, there's a technical thing or whatever. It reminds me of like last week, there was a story about MoviePass. Do you remember MoviePass?
I do, yeah.
MoviePass was great, I was in it when it was good. The issue was they figured out, oh wait, this isn't sustainable. We need to figure out a way to undercut the core thing of MoviePass is you can see as many movies as you want. That was inconvenient for them. So eventually they added a thing where sometimes when you go to get your ticket, it would say you need to take a picture of your ticket and send it in. And people would find out, oh wait, sometimes it doesn't work, as if it's buggy. It wasn't buggy. It was revealed eventually, an email chain, they had a percentage set for it to break. And they could change that percentage as they needed to. So it might be 2%, and then there would be an email from a CEO saying, no, 3%. We need to make 3% of them fail when they try to take the picture of the thing. I have no idea whether anything like that could be happening at any other company, let alone Amazon. But we should not assume that there's these coincidences, that it's just inefficiency, that it's, you got lost in the system. massive companies are in it for money. They know how to, like you can see the fact that they're checking every second of what you're doing. They know how to really hone in there. And so there should definitely be investigations into these sorts of abuses, especially when, in the case with Amazon, there were so many COVID cases, people's lives were on the line too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. By the way, that same story, which I don't remember if we did it on the main show, but I gotta see, because there were other details in that should make you aware of certain business models that are propped up by venture capitalists, right? And so what happened with Uber, for instance, which has never turned a profit, is they had this business model where venture capitalists were losing money because they were literally subsidizing the company to offer incredibly cheap rides. And so it made them a huge competitor to traditional taxis and all of that. And so they cornered that market, offered the cheap rides, and then now that they've put a bunch of taxi companies out of business and all of that, that subsidy from the investors is being pulled away. So if you've found yourself paying like $50 for an Uber ride, and you're wondering what's going on, I used to pay $12 for this, understand that they're ending what was propping up that business in the first place. So what they try to do is put other people out of business, monopolize the market, and then they jack up their prices. And we're certainly seeing that with Amazon as well.
Yeah, that's the Walmart market.
Yeah,
like way of doing business as well.
Exactly. Now with the internet, it's just like another flavor of that. Anyway, I lied. We actually are going to take a break, but when we come back, Joe Rogan has some thoughts about defund the police, which will be fun. We will debunk it, and then later in the show, we'll discuss Tucker Carlson's weird conspiracy theories about the January 6th riots. Come right back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries, because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country, so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. It's been a while since I've been able to read some comments, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a rapid fire round of our super chats. Many of you have some thoughts to share regarding the Amazon story that we just did. Cassie Kraft, my bad. Speaking of Amazon's HR, it's so hard to get human help that it took me more than 10 weeks to resolve a request. Yes, that's what workers are complaining about. I honestly have kind of like stopped buying anything on Amazon. And look.
Oh, I need to be better on that. I have many orders historically on Amazon.
No, but like it's not about individual behavior. I want to be clear about that because I think oftentimes the messaging that we hear puts the onus on individuals to change their behavior. I mean, that's certainly the case with climate change.
Sure.
No, we need to change the system, right? Like putting that on individuals doesn't make sense. But for whatever reason, I've kind of just stopped shopping at Amazon. But I do remember having an incident where it was impossible to get help on a package that never came. So it's just like the Uber thing I shared earlier, right? They find a way to monopolize, corner the market, and then all the good things about their business model in terms of customer service, the cheapness of the product, that goes away. It's not like they want to give you an affordable product and great customer service. That costs something, right? They just want to make you think that it's going to last forever, put other businesses out of business, and
it's all MoviePass.
Yep.
It's all MoviePass.
You're really bitter about that. Kevin C, by the way, I'm awful at rapid fire. I guess you guys can see that. Kevin C, on a lighter note, we all need. John just found out today, every time someone subs on YouTube during main show, a banner appears saying, "Dragon Daddy's pleased." It was me, I told him.
It was me. I was the one who told him. Yeah, I did not know that.
Fernando Vortex, you are awesome. Thank you for that comment. And Janet, AKA Gemstar Dragon, I like that. My brother and I went to a No Labels convention. No Labels is the billionaire donor group that had that call with Manchin a few years ago, not knowing all of what they are about. Thank you, TYT, for bringing attention to it. My pleasure. Thank you so much for watching. And one more comment, actually, because it's from one of my faves, Franklin, who writes poetry. And this is the poem for the day. Hardy, hardy, hardy. Should there be a TYT party? Dragons of virtue, finally with might. Do what no one will do. Fight, fight, fight. Grow it from 10, make it 20. 30 would be okay with no court money.
I don't follow the last part, but I appreciate the craft.
I liked it. I liked it. All right, let's go to our next story. So Joe Rogan chimed in on what every single part of this country is in fact experiencing an uptick in crime. Now, this is something we need to pay close attention to because it would be wrong to deny that there's been an increase in crime. And the reason why we need to pay attention to it is because if we don't, we're gonna get basically swung in a right-wing direction with talking points like this.
You didn't see Republicans, when we had control of the Senate, try to rig the game.
Shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America.
Our systems are not racist.
That's right. It's time to debunk a talking point that was uttered by Joe Rogan during a recent episode of his podcast. He thinks that what Black Lives Matter was protesting about has led to terrible results. Take a listen.
Well, and cops don't do anything if someone jumps into someone's backyard. They don't arrest them. Like, you have to do like $900 worth of theft before they'll even arrest you.
Really?
And if they do arrest you, they just put you right back on the street.
And has it always been that way, or is this after the defunding?
After the defunding.
Yeah.
Well, that's the defunding of the police in Austin's been a disaster too. And New York's been a disaster. It's terrible everywhere. It's a terrible idea. The idea that you're gonna send social workers to handle someone's domestic violence case is bananas. And there's a lot of people that don't understand violence that think that's okay. And and they have this like utopian idea of like, we don't need the police, man. We were talking about defunding the police. We're talking about defunding the police. That's what we mean. And then guess what, face? When there's crazy gang lords roaming the streets, controlling everything, like certain parts of New York, and then people get murdered. And
you made it sound really cool. These gang lords, they're wearing their pimp jackets.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. Before I give you the actual evidence and what's really going on, John, I want to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah, it's uninformed, it's ignorant, it's uninformed and incredibly confident. You smack those two things together and you've got the commentary. Well, here's the thing. It couldn't have, the issues cannot have been because of defunding the police, because it didn't happen. It's in the same way that the recent spike in crime isn't because so many Americans are worshiping Great Cthulhu right now. It can't be because of that, because they don't. I've tried to get them on board, they're not fans. You can't just come up with some random thing that isn't being done and then try to lay the blame on that. And solely lay the blame on it. Is it possible maybe that there's more crime because millions and millions of people lost their jobs and have been left behind by their government, left to fend for themselves? And that's at the tail end of multiple decades of wages never increasing. People have been decimated economically by what's been going on. No, it's probably just that the police aren't doing anything. Suddenly people are like, well, I wasn't going to be a criminal. In fact, I have this great job, I'm doing fine, but I think I'm gonna break into someone's house because the cops are wussies now. That's why I'm gonna do it. That's just nonsense, absolute nonsense. And to propose that, they want to send social workers to take out like suicide bombers and stuff like that. No, they're talking about sending them in cases where people have mental health problems, and that is the best solution to the problem. I'm sorry if I don't understand violence enough, but I do understand one kind of violence, and that is what happens when you send a cop to deal with someone who's having a simple mental health problem, and very often the cop ends up shooting the person. That happens over and over and over again. That's a simple enough kind of violence that anyone can understand it, I guess.
All right, well, I mean, John said everything that needed to be said.
No, there's lots more.
Jump into it. That was great. And so I'll provide evidence to reinforce what you're saying, because what you're saying isn't just opinion, there's a lot of data to back that up. Now, again, no one is excusing the violence, no one's excusing the fact that there has been an uptick in crime. It's something that needs to be dealt with. And I think that the Democratic Party certainly has not been bold enough in offering solutions to it and offering an alternative to the tough on crime laws that were passed in the 1990s, which of course imprisoned all sorts of nonviolent offenders, ruining their lives, depriving children of their parents. I mean, obviously that tactic did not work. Those policies did not work. So what is the solution? What's the alternative? I think that's the discussion we need to be having. But just to counter what Joe Rogan was saying in that episode of his podcast, let's take a look at what's really happening with police budgets, because I think that it's this common misconception that police budgets have been cut all across the board. We have defunded the police, except that's actually not the case. So let's actually start off with someone, a person of authority, because she works closely with police departments. Laura Cooper, executive director of the Major Cities Chiefs Association, which represents police executives in the United States and Canada, says that the defund the police movement, quote, has not been pervasive, end quote, across the membership cities. And she noted, in a lot of places, they've actually increased police budgets. Cooper added, their data shows violent crime has increased even in the first quarter of 2021, regardless of whether cities increased or decreased their police budgets. Now let's get to specific numbers, right? Because when you look at various cities, you'll notice that what Cooper is saying there is absolutely true. Let's start with Austin, where I believe Joe Rogan relocated to. I think that's where he's living now. Austin hasn't technically defunded police, but the city council did vote last year to cut the police department's budget by 1/3 through measures that included reorganization. Now, New York City cut around $1 billion or 1/6 of their police department's budget, right? So that sounds like a lot, like 1/3 of Austin's budget. They say technically because it hasn't gone into effect yet.
Sure.
So that's why it's relevant. Like what he's noticing right now actually has nothing to do with defunding the police, because Austin hasn't implemented the cuts to the local police department yet. They voted on it, they approved it, but it hasn't happened yet. With that said, let's go to the next graphic, which gives you a broader look. So a Bloomberg City Lab analysis of 2020 and 21 police budgets from the 50 largest cities reveals most major US cities, including those that have swung left since the 2016 presidential election, have been unwilling to make meaningful cuts. In fact, let's look at some of these big cities. More than half of cities where Democrats gained shares, maintained, or even increased their police budgets. Out of 42 major cities where Democrats gained share, 24 increased police spending for fiscal year 2021, while 18 of them made cuts. But the cuts are honestly negligible when you look at the bigger picture, right? So even as the 50 largest US cities reduced their 2021 police budgets by 5.2%, in aggregate, often as part of broader pandemic cost-cutting initiatives, law enforcement spending as a share of general expenditures actually rose slightly to 13.7% from 13.6%.
Yeah, which look, you'd have to look at individual cities or individual states to figure out, but if their relative share is increasing after their budget is decreased even by a little bit, that means that other areas of local and state government, city government are being decreased even more. So those pointless, worthless social workers, they're likely to be experiencing cuts too. All of that across many different areas is gonna have a big effect on people's lives. It's gonna lead to more desperation, people not getting the services that they need. All of that is likely, potentially, to contribute to crime.
And so let's discuss what the possible causes of crime could be, since it's not really cuts in police budgets, right? Now look, you might argue that the protests led to depleted morale, and so police they're not feeling motivated to do their jobs, but that sounds like a problem with their behavior and performance on the job, not really policy or anything that we have control over. But there are other very significant reasons we've seen an uptick in violence, particularly gun violence, which we've talked about on the show before. Look at the numbers, look at the amount of guns that were sold during the pandemic. So FBI data suggests nearly 40 million guns were sold last year, a 40% increase from 2019. New data from Northwestern University and the Harvard Injury Control Research Center found roughly 20% of those who bought guns last year were actually first-time gun owners. The research also found 39% of American households now own guns, and that's up from 32% 5 years earlier. There's of course economic anxiety tied to the coronavirus pandemic. There's also the fact, I think this is actually an issue that's talked about, that isn't talked about enough, and it has to do with places where people would gather, right? Places where people would go and spend their time with others, which kept them out of any type of crime, any type of sketchy stuff. The pandemic weakened community institutions that experts say typically deter crime. Patrick Sharkey, a sociologist and criminologist at Princeton, has said the corresponding disconnection from places like schools and pools and recreation centers all help increase the conditions that may lead to violent behavior. Roman at the University of Chicago too has argued that the disruption of routine activities for large numbers of young men in poor areas likely contributed to violence with other young men in similar situations. So I want to have a constructive, exactly. Like we need to have a constructive discussion about this, and especially those on the left who want to offer solutions to what we're experiencing, because if we don't, I guarantee you the pendulum will swing from just mere discussions about criminal justice reform to the extreme right, where we just start criminalizing any and all nonviolent behavior.
Or massively fund them again.
Right.
I feel like that's somewhat inevitable at this point. Yeah, it's complicated. Multiple things are playing into it. It's not super simple to turn into a tiny little soundbite, on a podcast or whatever, but it's reality. It has that advantage for it.
Absolutely. All right, you know what? Let's take our first break for the second hour. When we come back, we'll discuss what's happening across the country in these red states in regard to critical race theory. The culture wars rage on because it's all the GOP wants to focus on. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our social break. Really important comment, and I want to definitely co-sign onto this. So let me just find it. Depleted Uranium Cowboy says, shout out to the TYT moderators for having to deal with those who don't hold progressive values. Love y'all. I'm so grateful for you guys, and I apologize that that our moderators have to deal with that. The wave of awfulness and the troll farms that continue to target us. So yes, thank you for mentioning them. I'm super grateful for them, and they deserve a lot of support and a lot of love. Max Powers says, I feel like this is something you know about, John. What is
What's
this? What is that right there?
Cthulhu is pleased.
Cthulhu. I don't know what that is. Cthulhu is pleased.
He's one of the great old ones. It's kind of a big deal. Literally, he's huge.
Birdie's effing mitten says Rogan is the worst. His whole career is promoting violence. Enjoy your new failing Texas power grid.
Well, look, he's not the worst. I just think he should do more research. Like he's curious and open to everything, right? That's like the branding. Oh, well then bring on the sociologists, bring on the criminologists. Like he's literally not the worst. He gets things wrong a distressing amount of time considering the size of his audience, but he's supposed to be open to learning. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah. I try to be patient, because I think that he's a little impressionable. But yes, it's difficult. Trista writes in and says, hey, Anna and John, there is a Reuters report that notes that nearly 200,000 criminals were released during the first few months of COVID. So these career criminals are driving up the crime wave. So let me just note, I think there might be some truth in that, but it's not because, look, they didn't release people who were imprisoned or convicted of violent crimes. They released nonviolent offenders. But here's the problem. This is what frustrates me about some Democrats, because they'll set you up to fail, right? It's one thing to release or do an early release of nonviolent offenders, but what are you offering to help them, like, make that transition into society? Because it's freaking hard out there, right? It's hard out there for people who haven't been convicted of anything. Yeah. We got to figure out what we're gonna do with housing, with food, with how are they gonna take care of themselves? Are they offering a system to help them transition into society? That's the real question, because I think a lot of the policies we're seeing that might have good intentions just aren't really well thought out, and that is an issue. Setting people up to fail is really no better than what we had been experiencing before. So anyway, even if their heart is in the right place. So I wanna be clear about that. We gotta get back to the show. Time is going by too fast today. I'm like Cenk, I have like no sense of time and I'm taking too long with everything. Let's get back to the show though. Welcome back to TYT. Let's get right to our next story. Texas has signed a bill into law that would prevent discussions about current events and racism in the classroom. Yes, this is the ongoing story about critical race theory and how the GOP on one hand has no idea what critical race theory is, and on the other hand goes out of its way to censor educators and indoctrinate students because their feelings get hurt when it comes to discussing very real issues that we're experiencing right now with systemic racism, but also they apparently can't handle genuine, factual course material about this country's history with racism. Now, let me give you these details. And again, this is legislation that was just signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, although he's not the only one. The legislation, supported by virtually every GOP state legislator, states the social studies teachers in public K-12 schools may not be compelled to talk about current events or public policy or social issues considered controversial. If they do talk about such things, they are required to present the issue without giving deference to any one perspective. So it's clearly stated that teachers can't talk about very specific things. They can't make it part of a course, for instance, to talk about the concept that someone could be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of the individual's race, or the concept that an individual's moral character, standing, or worth is necessarily determined by the individual's race or sex. Also,
really fast, that's like a lot of words to say racism. Like you can't talk about racism.
That's it, that's all it is. You're right. A lot of word salad going on, but we can cut right through it and just tell you what it really is. And again, this is part of something that I've been trying to draw more and more attention to among our viewers. It's just this unwillingness of GOP lawmakers, whether they're local lawmakers or on a federal level, to really address the material concerns or the legitimate concerns of their constituents. So what do they do instead to give people the illusion that they're actually doing something? They focus on this kind of stuff without, by the way, even really understanding what critical race theory is. Like, they've been talking about critical race theory incessantly. And then when you ask specific Republican lawmakers, what is critical race theory? They don't really have an answer. And I think that's relevant to the point that I've been trying to make, right? First of all, yes, there are certainly lawmakers who are just plain racist themselves and they want to deny that racism has been a problem in the country, continues to be a problem in the country, but there's that other ulterior motive that I want people to be a little more savvy about, you know? Let me give you one more graphic just to give you context, and then I want to hear what you have to say, John. They can't make it part of a course to talk about the concept that the advent of slavery in the United States was central to the founding of the United States, or that slavery and racism are anything other than deviations from, betrayals of, or failures to live up to the country's founding principles. So it reminds me of the interaction that Ryan Grim had with his co-host on The Hill, on The Rising, right? They were filling in, and Ryan Grim said, Stalin beat the Nazis. Like he was actually an integral part of beating the Nazis. And she was shocked by that because that's not what's taught in our history classes in public schools.
Yeah.
Very intentionally. And so I know that people wanted to make fun of her for that, but can you really blame her when we literally have a system in place that intentionally keeps, I know, keeps people ignorant?
Sure. And look, there's nuance. It's not like, United States soldiers didn't help, obviously, but they were not the bulk of it. That's just a historical fact. But really fast though, I'm just worried because this video is gonna be broadcast to Texas. So it sounded like you gave deference to one position on Stalin beating the Nazis. You're not supposed to give deference to any position. Maybe did, maybe didn't, we don't know. And the Nazis, like no, but really, we were talking about this on the Damage Report. Imagine in Texas trying to teach about the Holocaust. You can't do it. You can't do it because this sort of racism, bigotry, systemic racism, the belief that Aryan whites are better than Jews, let alone gypsies, members of the LGBT community, black Germans, like all that. You cannot teach about any of that. This is effectively Holocaust denial for the youth of Texas. Could you have a more inherently anti-Semitic education policy? I defy you to come up with one. And then I defy you to actually talk about it in a public school in Texas without getting fired. It's all madness. And it's just like, at the same time that they're saying the left has a problem with censorship. That's what the left is. That's the narrative I hear about cancel culture all the time. This is something inherently about the left that we try to control what people say, what they do, what they think. Oh, by the way, teachers shouldn't be able to talk about anything, and we should probably put body cameras on them just in case. That's what they're actually saying. And really fast, it makes me nostalgic, I guess, for the GOP of the past because they always were seeking to distract their base while pursuing their actual economic agenda. But at least in the past, like they got them all worked up in 2004 and they got all these state ballot initiatives to stop gay people from being able to get married. But at least in that case, gay people were actually wanted to get married. Like that was an actual thing. All their stuff this year is based on nothing.
Right.
The critical race theory, they don't teach critical race theory in elementary schools in Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't actually going after Mr. Potato Head. The book company that supposedly was canceling Seuss, the Seuss family wanted this. Like it's all made up. It's all nonsense. Why can't you come up with a wedge issue that's based on something approaching reality?
Snaps to you. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a made up controversy among right-wing lawmakers. Again, mostly because they want to deflect from the real issues that are impacting people's lives, and also because they genuinely don't want to allow educators to have these conversations in the classroom. This is the political party that claims that liberals are indoctrinating students across America in these classroom settings. Now, anytime you hear anything from the GOP about that, just know that they're projecting. Because Texas specifically has a long history of trying to influence things like textbooks by taking historical figures like Cesar Chavez out of the social studies curriculum, replacing him with right-wing figures, all sorts of nonsense. And so I'm not surprised that this law was signed in Texas, but it's not the only state. As of June 10th, legislators in 20 states have introduced bills to restrict teaching, critical race theory. And when you look at Alabama specifically, you have Representative Chris Pringle. He's a Republican, politician from the state of Alabama. And so he voted to ban teaching critical race theory in the state. And so speaking to Alabama.com, Pringle responded with whataboutism regarding, this whole issue. He says, it basically teaches that certain children are inherently bad because of the color of their skin. So going back to what I was saying earlier, guys, about how they don't even really know what critical race theory is. This is his interpretation of it. It basically teaches that certain children are inherently bad people because of the color of their skin, period. I introduced a very brief version of the bill to start the conversation, but it's very difficult in this cancel society to have a frank discussion about racism in this country and this country's history. I mean, history is being rewritten, and I'm not exactly sure of the accuracy of what's there now and what they're trying to change it to or into.
Leave up that graphic, because every word he said there is true, but for none of the reasons that he's actually saying. So history is being rewritten, and I'm not actually sure of the accuracy of what's out there. Well, yeah, they're banning you from learning about history while people like Governor Noem are like, I'm gonna teach you about how very special the United States are. So rewrite it to be nonsense. I don't know what the history is. I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. Can you bring up that graphic once again? Because there's one more bit of that I wanna read. It's very difficult in this cancel society to have a frank discussion about racism in this country and this country's history. Well, yes. It is going to be very difficult to have a frank discussion about racism in this country because they've canceled the discussion about racism in this country. In 22 different states, they either already have banned this sort of discussion or are in the process of doing so. Not just making it difficult to have the discussion. If you're a teacher in Texas, you literally can't talk about racism, or I don't know what the consequences will be. Ben Shapiro will get one of the students to tattletale on you and then you'll get fired. That's basically what's going to happen. So almost everything he said there was perfect projection. I don't credit him for that because I think he's stumbling in it. I don't think he's smart enough to do this intentionally like some in right-wing media are able to, but that is totally 100% projection about their desire to cancel conversations about the accurate history of the United States and to rewrite history to make it seem as if America's always been amazing. And the worst thing we ever did was not giving enough Nutella to other countries. We never done anything bad.
Is that a thing? Was Nutella in the news?
I don't know. I don't think we made it anyway. But it's just, but that's not that bad. So it proves the point.
Yeah, no, you nailed it, right? Like it's so hard to talk about racism, and so I'm introducing a bill that makes it impossible to talk about racism.
Literally impossible.
Yeah. It's just pathetic, absolutely pathetic. All right, let's get to our next story because this points out ongoing Republican hypocrisy on the issue of supporting police. GOP lawmakers tend to cherry pick incidents where they decide to support cops. Now, if there's an unarmed person running away from cops who gets shot and killed in the back, then you should support police. However, when it comes to Capitol Police, who had to ward off violent rioters on January 6th, maybe we shouldn't support those police. At least that's what Republican lawmakers were communicating to the rest of the country in a House bill meant to at least honor the Capitol Police officers who bore the brunt of the riots that day. The House passed legislation to award Congressional Gold Medals, one of the highest civilian honors, to police officers who defended the Capitol during the violent January 6th insurrection. Lawmakers handily passed the legislation, but there is a caveat. Members of both parties supported it, 406 to 21, with all the voters in opposition coming from conservative Republicans. That's weird. I thought that they supported police. They have difficult jobs. They put their lives on the line. It's a very risky profession to engage in. But if honoring medals to police means accepting the brutal reality of what happened that day, maybe we don't want to support the police. Now, the resolution names 3 specific police officers: Brian Sicknick and Howard Liebengood of the Capitol Police and Jeffrey Smith of the Metropolitan Police, who died in the days after they were on duty at the Capitol on January 6th. It also highlights the heroism of then Officer Eugene Goodman. Goodman was shown on a video captured by a reporter luring the mob away from the Senate chamber in a move that helped former Vice President Mike Pence and senators escape to safety. How dare he? Should definitely not be honored, according to Republican lawmakers, and I want to name them. So Republicans who voted against the bill were Representatives Tom Massey, Andy Biggs, Lauren Boebert. Oh, Lauren Boebert's in there. Michael Cloud, Andrew Clyde, Warren Davidson, Matt Gaetz, shocker there, Louis Gohmert, Bob Good, Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, I mean, just a group of lovely, lovely individuals. We have Andy Harris, Jody Heiss, Mary Miller, Barry Moore, Ralph Norham. Ralph Norman, Scott Perry, John Rose, Matt Rosendale, and Chip Roy. And let's not forget Greg Stube from Florida. So
I already have.
All of these Republican lawmakers, when it comes to shooting and killing unarmed people, they'll definitely defend the cops.
Yeah.
But when it comes to honoring cops who did their part and paid a price during those riots, no medal for you.
I was surprised to not see Madison Cawthorn on that list. Look at him.
I mean, yeah, I know who he
that's
is,
a good point. But normally he would be a part of that group. And yeah, it's weird that people like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Greene didn't want to honor these cops who stood against the Antifa super soldiers on January 6th as leftists swarmed through the building. Weird. So like they want to pretend that it was the left or it was provocateurs or whatever, but they're certainly voting like they know who was in that group and that they need to protect them and not imply that they get how dangerous it was and everything. I would say in general terms, the government showmanship of cops are the best and everything, I'm almost universally opposed to that. In this particular case, it's a couple of cops who did something incredibly brave. It's amazing that they could justify standing against it, just saying it's too partisan or whatever. Like, you know what you're doing.
Well, apparently they have a very specific reason for why they're against this, and it's because of the terminology used, right? So let's go to Representative Thomas Massie, who says, quote, "I think if we call that an insurrection, it could have a bearing on their case that I don't think would be good. If they just wanted to give the police recognition, they could have done it without trying to make it partisan, without sticking that in there." So he has a problem with the use of insurrection in the legislation.
He has more of a problem with it than with the actual insurrection, oddly enough.
That's exactly right, because the Republican Party doesn't want to take responsibility for what they aided and abetted, what they enabled, what they refused to speak out against. And hey, midterm elections are coming up, right? We don't want that riot to be in any way attached to us, except it is. You have people storming the Capitol chanting "Hang Mike Pence" right after a Trump speech encouraging them to do so, not to chant "Hang Mike Pence," but you get what I'm saying, like to go fight like hell.
Yeah.
And it was about overturning the results of the election.
Yeah, and by the way, Trump might not have said "hang Mike Pence," that's true, but he continually said, oh, well, if Mike Pence does what he needs to do, the election will go the other way. It was totally wrong. Totally untrue. Mike Pence never had any ability to change the outcome, but Trump spent literally weeks telling them that if Mike Pence doesn't solve it, it's on him. He could solve it, he's just choosing not to do so.
That's exactly right. I mean, anyway, unfortunately, we have more lunacy on the topic of the Capitol Hill riots when we come back from the break. Tucker Carlson has all sorts of conspiracy theories about it, so stick around. All right, guys, I am backed up on member comments, so I am actually gonna do a rapid fire round. And yes, all of these comments have to do with stories we did much earlier in the show, but just bear with me. Eclectic missiles aren't for Zionists. Says this, human beings are inherently lazy, says the guy who's stepping down as CEO at age 57. Yeah, and also the guy, Jeff Bezos, of course, the guy who needs the federal government to hand him $10 billion for his little pet project. It's just gross. Melissa, the Defender Dragon, has a comment about Amazon as well. My family member was saying that she keeps getting messages now from Amazon drivers because they don't know how to find her house because of some construction, which only tells you how many delivery drivers they probably go through, a regular delivery driver would be able to figure it out. Eclectic writes in with another comment, this time about Representative Ilhan Omar. I think Ilhan Omar and other progressives should issue a letter condemning the Democratic colleagues who are Zionist apologists, equating the Palestinians launching fire balloons and rockets with Israelis launching US-made bombs into land they illegally occupy as offensive as it is ludicrous, or is as offensive as it is ludicrous. Kid tested, Politburo approved, also has a comment about Israel. If you wrote a movie in which a persecuted population used fire balloons against a government and that government responded with airstrikes, you'd assume I was talking about the Hunger Games. That definitely feels like we're living in the Hunger Games already, to be honest. But yes, you're right. Hamas is bad and Israel is worse. The amount of violence and misery they spread is astounding. Little Mac McG writes in and says, the really sad part, this is about the Manchin corruption story. There are much easier ways to make money than being corrupt in politics as a politician. Sheesh. I don't get why you would want to be in government unless you were there to help the people. Well, I mean, when insider trading is allowed, essentially it is allowed. No, you can make a lot of money. I mean, the vast majority of our lawmakers are millionaires. So whenever we talk about representation in Congress, how about some representation for the working class? You know?
That would be cool.
I mean, I could think of
Justice Democrats.
A few people, yes, but we need to keep fighting. Like, we need to get more and more progressives into Congress. It's so important. Ooh, 30 seconds left. Mickey C, the silver hair dragon says, speaking of automation, I read today that Walmart is going to go completely self-checkout. The dystopia is here, guys. Self-checkout is providing free labor for these corporations. That's what self-checkout is. Don't get it twisted. We gotta get back to the show. In 8 seconds. Okay, right now. Great though. The music is great.
He's doing a good job.
Yeah. Bart Kyle, our sound guy extraordinaire. Thank you for that fun music. You know I love electronic stuff. All right, anyway, let's move on to our next story because Tucker Carlson is aiding and abetting Republican denials about what really transpired and what was really behind the Capitol riots. Tucker Carlson is now spreading all sorts of insane conspiracy theories about what was actually behind the insurrection, the Capitol riots that took place on January 6th. Let's go to this first video where he specifically talks about Putin's opinion on one of the insurrectionists getting shot and unfortunately killed during the chaos.
So because of January 6th, says the chief law enforcement officer in the United States of America and many other members of Joe Biden's cabinet, we must now use law enforcement and military force to arrest, imprison, and otherwise crush anyone who leads opposition to Joe Biden's government. That's their position. They say that out loud. They did today. We are living through the transformation of a formerly democratic republic into something else. We're looking at growing authoritarianism. That's not an overstatement. Vladimir Putin knows authoritarian systems very well. And he sees clearly what is happening in this country. Watch this.
Did you order Alexei Navalny's assassination? Of course not. We don't have this kind of habit of assassinating anybody. That's one. Number two is, I want to ask you, did you order the assassination of the woman who walked into the Congress and who was shot and killed by a policeman? Do you know that 450 individuals were arrested after entering the Congress, and they didn't go there to steal a laptop? They came with political demands.
Okay, So yeah, we just played tape of Vladimir Putin. Now, under normal circumstances, we would never play tape of a foreign adversary criticizing our government. But honestly, those are fair questions. Who did shoot Ashley Babbitt, and why don't we know? Are anonymous federal agents now allowed to kill unarmed women who protest the regime? That's okay now?
Law enforcement shoots and kills extrajudicial killings of ordinary civilians, citizens on a daily basis if they dare question the authority of the cops. That happens all the time. In this particular case, we're talking about a group of people who broke into the Capitol building violently, okay, despite what some media figures purportedly on the left would have you believe, okay, and caused all sorts of damage, violently responded to Capitol Police. This woman, Ashley Babbitt, look, I wish that there was a way that they could have restrained her and prevented that shooting from happening. But he used the word ordered the assassination. Ordering the assassination would imply that this was a predetermined decision. There was no predetermined decision. You have Ashley Babbitt trying to break into, I believe it was the House floor, if I'm not mistaken. It could have been the Senate floor, but it doesn't matter. She's in the process of climbing through that door, right? They had broken the window of that door to climb in it, and she got shot. And it's unfortunate, I wish it didn't happen, but to equate that to what an authoritarian regime like Russia's authoritarian regime would do is ridiculous. Yeah. And to play sound from Vladimir Putin, pretending as if he's like this great guy who believes in democracy and fairness and protest. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, look, if you want to have a debate about whether the police should release the name of the cop that did it, that's fine. Sure. That doesn't make what Putin said there a fair question. Putin, he just has legitimate concerns that he was expressing. No, he was trying to distract from assassinations that his government has routinely ordered. That's all he was doing. It's the exact opposite of a fair question. It's an unfair question, actually. Anyway. Look, it's just utter not, like, he doesn't care. Tucker doesn't care about any of this. He's not interested in any of this.
No, he is interested in it. He is interested in it because he wants to launder the Republican Party and their role in what happened in our nation's capital that day.
Sure, but
he is interested in that.
What he doesn't care about is the truth. So now he's worried about like that we're being unfair to the protesters. A couple months ago, they were Antifa that were breaking down the door. Suddenly they're not Antifa anymore. What I'm saying is that like all of the facts about it are totally contingent. Is this signaling, a different approach that he's gonna have when cops brutalize BLM protesters in the future? Are we supposed to believe that? No? Does he have a problem with cops trying to run through crowds of protesters? When there was that protester, I don't remember if it was in Oregon, if it was in Washington, I apologize, I don't remember. He had shot someone, and rather than going and getting him, they gunned him down in the streets. An extrajudicial execution that Trump talked about favorably afterward. Did Tucker have a problem with that?
Of course not, of course not.
So this is all just nonsense. Anyway, continue.
But it's not, okay, so obviously he's lying. Obviously there's a double standard and they'll change their commentary or their take depending on the political affiliations of the people that are being discussed, right? So if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, if we're talking about protesters on the left being brutalized, which by the way happened quite often under Trump, that's okay, that's totally fine. But when we're talking about the Capitol, I mean, this woman wasn't outside of the Capitol, part of a rally, and she was climbing into a room where lawmakers were, right? Luckily, they were able to escape before anyone really posed a threat to them. But I mean, it's madness, it's absolute insanity. And by the way, the lunacy continues with this conspiracy theory. Watch.
Strangely, some of the key people who participated on January 6th have not been charged. Look at the documents. The government calls those people unindicted co-conspirators. What does that mean? Well, it means that in potentially every single case, they were FBI operatives. Really, in the Capitol on January 6th. For example, one of those unindicted co-conspirators is someone government documents identify only as person 2. According to those documents, person 2 stayed in the same hotel room as a man called Thomas Caldwell, an insurrectionist, a man alleged to be a member of the group the Oath Keepers. Person 2 also, quote, stormed the barricades at the Capitol on January 6th alongside Thomas Caldwell. The government's indictments further indicate that Caldwell, who by the way is a 65-year-old man, this dangerous insurrectionist, was led to believe there would be a, quote, quick reaction force also participating on January 6th. That quick reaction force, Caldwell was told, would be led by someone called Person 3, who had a hotel room and an accomplice with him. But wait, here's the interesting thing. Person 2 and Person 3 were organizers of the riot. The government knows who they are, but the government has not charged them. Why is that? You know why. They were almost certainly working for the FBI. So FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to government documents.
What government documents? What government? No, I guess this is just the strain that like binds the right wing together, right? Conspiracies about the CIA and the FBI, right? Like that's an internet troll utters nonsense like that. In fact, there is an internet troll who uttered nonsense like that and bragged about feeding those talking points to Tucker Carlson. One more video, John, and then you jump in. Let's watch.
It is overwhelming, the evidence that criminal elements of the federal government provocateured and staged January 6th. And I saw it coming. I warned people they were going to pull a false flag. And of course, the police were put in the middle of it, undermanned by design. This was a psychological warfare operation to manipulate a crowd. And President Trump was set up. I was set up. And I've been saying that since the day it happened. I had been working with other folks to get the information, obviously, out to the great Tucker Carlson. And Tucker did a really splendid job last night. So I'm going to air the entire 15-minute monologue coming up.
It's crazy.
No, but John just said it's crazy. It's not crazy. I'm not surprised in the least bit.
No, I mean the airing a full 15-minute monologue. That's crazy.
That is crazy, yeah.
Put together a rundown, seriously.
I'll give it to Alex Jones though. He mentioned psyops and manipulating a crowd. He and his ilk certainly know a lot about that with their troll farms. So don't be fooled by that, especially on places like Twitter. Go ahead.
Yeah, by the way, first of all, if they had succeeded and killed Mike Pence and put Trump back in charge, he would be cheering about them. Like, oh, I warned that it was gonna be a false flag. That's what I warned. No, like, dude, it was pathetic. It failed. That's why you're against it now. Wait, I thought it was Antifa. Again, no, it wasn't Antifa. It was just some Trump fans that got whipped up into a frenzy by the FBI now. So again, it's always something different, but I'm not so interested in Alex Jones. With the Tucker Carlson though, so he starts off by saying, is it possible that these unindicted co-conspirators are FBI? And 2 minutes later he said, it was organized by the FBI. He talked himself into, no, it's definitely the FBI, even though that's not how anything works. They're unindicted co-conspirators, not because they were the FBI, but because they're cooperating with investigators right now. They're ratting on other people that were involved, and that's why their name is not being put in there. But even aside from that, that's the craziest part. But he said that guy Caldwell is 65. He's an insurrectionist. He's scary. You just described how he thought there would be a quick reaction force that would be working with them. And you want us to believe that it wasn't an insurrection. They were just simple protesters who thought a quick reaction force would be assisting them as they break into the building. That doesn't sound like a tourist who's staying within the lines. That sounds like someone who thinks they've got force that's going to take over this whole thing. So he's undercutting his own argument literally as he's spinning this nonsense.
100%. And you know, there is a way to look into what actually transpired in a bipartisan way. It's called a commission, which to be quite honest with you, I had been against because I'm worried about what the results will be of that commission, like what the proposed solutions will be. I'm worried about.
You don't want another Patriot Act.
I don't want another Patriot, exactly, right? However, I'm starting to really warm up to it because that commission would be made up of independent investigators. Those investigators would be a 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans, picking who will serve on the commission and serve as investigators. So that takes the bias or partisanship out of it. Why is it that Republicans don't want a full-blown investigation into that. Yeah. Why? If they're so concerned that there's some deep state conspiracy taking place, why wouldn't they want independent investigators looking into it? Could it be that they're making up like insane conspiracy theories, literally regurgitating stuff from
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones of all people? Like, have some self-respect. Like, I get what Tucker Carlson is. I get what the point of his show is. I know he's a propagandist and all of that. But can you at least have a little bit of self-respect and not regurgitate nonsense from the likes of Alex Jones?
Yeah.
I mean, how low is this guy willing to go?
Well, we're finding out every day. Really fast, you're warming up to a commission, not to a Patriot Act, lest people take that out of context for their own purposes.
Obviously,
she doesn't want that. But the obvious isn't always obvious to everyone. But yeah, it's complete. It's complete and utter nonsense. He has been playing defense for the insurrectionists this entire time because he wishes it had succeeded and he's a fan of it happening again. That's all it is. His show is designed to make people not worried about white supremacists, to think that it's not so bad, to think that it's not a big problem. That's what Tucker Carlson is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We got a little more time left before we go to our members only bonus episode. So if you're not a member, you can just click on that join button and you get 3 tiers presented to you. Go ahead and join whichever tier you're most comfortable with. And if you're not watching us on YouTube, you can go to tyt.com/join to become a member. I wanted to also thank our new YouTube members, which include Michael Howley, Jimmy California. Reminds me of that California. Oh, you don't watch Parks and Rec. Never mind.
Sorry.
John Cavadas and also Deuce Weeks. Thank you so much for becoming members. We really, really appreciate your support. And after our bonus episode today, you can enjoy a fresh new live episode of Happy Half Hour hosted by our very own Brett Ehrlich. So go over to our Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/TYT, where you can watch that live. I know I love to do that because who doesn't love a happy half hour after a full work day? Anyway, guys, can't wait to share some fun stories with you in our bonus episode. We'll see you there.
I'll predict right here for you, Chris. I think Donald Trump will leave office before his term is up. He'll be humiliated, embarrassed, and I know him. He's not gonna wanna lose, and he's gonna run for the hills.
You got that bet all day long.
Okay, let's get after it. Now, so look, Jake has made some good predictions, and this is in good fun. I could not disagree more.
There's no bromance between the two of them. You got that bet all day long, Jakey, you. Oh, you stop. In the meantime, let's call him out on the damage.
But
I just got a Roku set. Did basically a little bit of channel surfing, and I was like, there we are.
Yeah.
There we are. And then I turned it on, and it was John and Brett on Damage Report making fun of me.
Oh no.
So you are so busted. I even took a picture of it, okay? They're talking about my predictions. I got a new prediction for you, John Idarola.
You're doing a show that's blowing the doors off everybody.
Young Turks is the largest online news network, not a big deal. We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities. We're so sick of this corruption. We're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care. 4th day on Occupy Wall Street. Last night we launched Wolfpack. It's us pushing our ideas out there, trying to help the country in every way that we can, trying to make this place just a little bit better. Reporting from the Hillary-Bernie debate, I gotta be honest, you know what we do, we cover it for real. For us, this system isn't working. Free and fair elections.
And when he told the cops that day, when they came to drag her away, and he said, if you're gonna chain her, you're gonna chain me. If you're gonna arrest her, you're gonna arrest me.
Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
All I know is when we win a game, it's a team win. When we lose a game, it's a team loss.
Hey everyone, welcome to our bonus episode. We did 8 stories today. I felt like we did like 3 stories today. I felt like I took. There's so much we produced today that we didn't even get to, and I don't know why I do that. I don't know why I like.
You're interested in a lot of stuff. That's one of the necessary parts of the job. For basically everyone that works at TYT, it's there's so many things, I care about everything.
I know, I know. I hate like actually the hardest part of my day, believe it or not, is the production meeting because there's so many good pitches, and I hate saying no. Like making the decision about what to cut, what to keep, having a good balance, and I fail with the balance part all the time because there's like fun stories, right? And I want to include them.
Yeah,
and
you want to do a mix.
And I encourage them to pitch the fun stories. In fact, that's what I've been repeatedly encouraging them to do. But then, I don't know.
Imagine, so like someone like Tucker Carlson, we were talking about, like think about how easy his job is. The dude will do a solid hour, many hours, just here's why AOC sucks, or look at this trans kid, F them. Like that, and I'll just bring on 3 interviews, bunch of commercials, bada bing, bada boom, we're done. That's it, that's the whole hour, and I'm gonna get paid, $1 million for that show that I just put together. Like we have to invest ourselves in research, know about all these different topics every single day. And it's not just Tucker Carlson, almost every show on cable news is like that. Even if it is a good topic, it'll be the one thing.
There's a lot of that on YouTube too. It's all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, at least like Rachel Maddow at least clearly is doing a lot of research for her historical monologue intros and everything. But like Tucker Carlson is just blank-faced, condescending tone.
Super condescending,
I don't know how you can watch that and not feel like that dude thinks I'm an idiot, doesn't he?
Totally.
You are making me feel like an idiot right now. Oh my God.
Gross.
Yeah, they have a very sweet gig. Would you want a revolution if you were in a position like that? No,
definitely not.
Love the
no,
situation.
you're living large. Everything's great. Well, let's do some fun. Although I don't know how fun you guys are gonna find this story. I was amused by it. So California has fully opened. June 15th marked the day that businesses could operate at capacity. Of course, some businesses might have rules based on what they're comfortable with, whether you have to wear a mask or not. But the Foo Fighters, one of my favorite bands, decided to have a show to perform for the first time post-COVID, although yes, the pandemic is still ongoing, people are still getting sick, but the numbers are much lower thanks to vaccines. Now, on Tuesday of this week, they had their first concert, and fully vaccinated individuals were free to attend. And what really frustrated some entitled folks was that you had to be fully vaccinated, you had to show proof that you're fully vaccinated, and individuals who have been fear-mongering about vaccinations and aren't fully vaccinated protested the event. Okay, so one of the protesters was anti-masker Ricky Schroeder. So we have some images of this incredibly embarrassing protest. There were speakers there, including this lady, maskless, unvaccinated, probably putting herself at risk. And Schroeder is criticizing the band. In fact, on June 13th, he posted on Facebook this graphic, photo, whatever you want to call it. There goes my hero, watch him as he goes, there goes my hero. Heroes don't segregate or discriminate.
I can't believe that David Grohl actually
Grohl
posed in that shirt. That seems like a bad move. They were gonna use that for memes, you fool. Just don't put on a shirt like that.
Okay, let me just say, I saw the Foo Fighters live a few years ago. David Grohl had a broken leg. And so when Christian and I got there and noticed that he had a broken leg, we're like, oh, he's got a broken leg. Like, first of all, he's incredibly talented, incredible musician, incredible singer. He's got full package. I don't know how he broke his leg, I forget. But we were a little concerned because we're like, how is he gonna put on a show? Like, that's the thing about going to live shows and concerts. It's the dancing, it's the performance, it's the whole package, and we thought we weren't gonna get that. No, this guy is so incredible that with a broken leg, sitting in a Game of Thrones throne, he rocked out like I could not believe. It was amazing. It was one of my favorite shows of all time. He is so talented. Anyway, this is my way of saying
to pharma.
If I were an anti-vaxxer, that incentive of being able to go see a show, I'm gonna get the vaccine.
You should get another one to double your odds.
Right, I'll get 12 of them. I don't care. I wish I had pre-planned and knew about this ahead of time so I could have actually attended. But if you get an opportunity to go to a Foo Fighters concert, go, just go. If you like that kind of music, of course, because if you're like, no, I like country or classical music, you might not be into it as much as I was, but
still, he rocks, I hear.
By the way, I like classical music, not so much country, but you get what I'm saying.
Sure, yeah. There's like a short list of people that I've experienced just enough of their music that I know that were I to try to, I would be really into their music. They seem really good, but I can't get invested. I'm invested in too many things as it is.
What are you invested in these days?
I mean, I'm doing the second draft of this novel. I'm working on woodworking projects. I'm trying to maintain this career and life and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm reading, I don't know. What are you doing?
You are a well-rounded individual.
I try.
I need to get back to a little bit of balance, to be honest with you. I've kind of let hobbies and things kind of like fall by the wayside because I've been too focused on work. But yeah, it's good. It's good to.
I'm gonna help you.
Yes.
Because once everything's really reopened, we're gonna take a woodworking course together, and then Krav Maga.
Dude,
You've been wanting to do self-defense.
Yes.
I want to get back into it.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. And you know what? Third activity, I'm gonna take you to a concert.
A Foo Fighters concert.
If the opportunity presents itself, absolutely. But it'll be something that you'll like. There was a Game of Thrones themed concert a few years
Hollywood
ago.
Bowl?
No, although yes, there was one at the Hollywood Bowl. That's not the one I went to. It was at the Forum in Los Angeles. And that was also it was the classical music, of course, and then they had people dressed up like Game of Thrones characters, I think, if I remember correctly.
That would make sense if it was Game of Thrones themed, yeah.
It was awesome. Well, yes.
They're Lord of the, it's like Legolas and Bilbo on the Iron Throne. This is muddled.
Bilbo Baggins, yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. That'll be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go to our next story. This is a doozy. So, one thing that I've learned, we're going to Kentucky, guys. Let's go to Kentucky. There we go. One thing that I've learned about people with children, especially people with young children who play sports, is that parents turn into lunatics. And so do some coaches, and that was certainly the case when it came to a Kentucky Little League T-ball game that ended, I'm not kidding, in violence and criminal charges. So adult parents and coaches got into it. It was a 12-person physical fight over a call. So this is T-ball. This is not minor league baseball. This isn't major league baseball. This doesn't matter. But parents are parents, coaches are coaches, and it ended in fisticuffs. So, the chaos was reportedly sparked by a dispute over a call. The video shows some parents in the stands desperately trying to stop the chaos as the field is overrun with cursing, brawling parents, yelling things like piece of crap and sorry ass excuse between punches. The shaken parent who filmed the fracas can be heard at one point exclaiming, "This is a effing kids game. Where's my effing kid?" All right, obviously I have to be a little careful, to read that without letting the F-bombs drop. But we do have some video to share with you of this incident. Let's take a look.
Oh no. That was worse than I thought it would be.
Parents get rowdy at these things. It's kind of amazing.
That's one word, yeah. As Craig was pointing out, South Park has predicted a lot of things, but their episode about Randy Marsh going to baseball games just to get liquored up and fight somebody is true. Like, this is not a story of people getting worked up over T-ball. This is a story of people wanting to fight and looking for an excuse to fight.
Yeah.
And the T-ball is a bit of an excuse, I guess.
Is it though?
Nobody cares that much.
No.
It's not like they didn't lose $50,000 on that call or something.
You're not a parent. You don't get it. You just,
Maybe.
I'm not, by the way, I'm not a parent either. However, my husband just recently ended a season of coaching Little League.
Did he kill anyone?
No, I
kill a
mean,
man.
Christian is like the sweetest guy ever. He would never, in fact, he had to take the lead for his men's softball, whatever. And so the guy who's usually in charge couldn't make it that day. And so he had to be the one to like contest some of the calls made by the, is it referee or umpire? I don't know.
Umpire.
Anyway, and he hated it. He's like, I don't like contesting calls. It's the worst. He just goes with it usually.
Yeah. So
But
he's not gonna like drop kick a second baseman or anything?
No, definitely not.
I don't. It's just so embarrassing. But like we're a messed up culture. Like it's almost as if the lower the stakes are, the more angry we get. So it's like everything in politics, maybe I'll vote. You can get a little bit of money off of TV on Black Friday. Just like it's trampling over kids to get in there. Like we love fighting over nothing. That's what we like. And there ain't nothing more nothing than like a kid in T-ball getting called out at third.
It's crazy. No, but also
the kid doesn't even know what sport they're playing, honestly.
I think a lot of parents live through their children, even children as young as 5 to 7. And that may have been the issue here, although the brawl really started with the coach getting pretty upset. So people at the game say one parent took his shirt off, cursing and punching at those around him. Children on the teams ranging from 5 to 7 years old, by the way, were said to be left in tears after the violent melee derailed a planned trophy and medal ceremony. It's amazing.
So this is like Game of Thrones right here.
It's.
By the way, that guy who took off his shirt, I knew a guy who used to take off his shirt a bunch. It was never about the thing that made him take off his shirt. He just wanted to take off his shirt. That dude went expecting to take off his shirt.
He's like, oh, perfect, perfect
It's go time.
opportunity.
It's go time, Billy.
So yeah, so again, it started off with the coach getting upset with a call by the umpire, and the coach later wrote on Facebook, if you're gonna post videos and call me a POS coach, why don't you show the whole video? I'm done with this guy. No, they're 5 to 7 years old. It's T-ball. You know what T-ball is? Jared had to explain it to me because I'm not in that world at all. T-ball, like, there's no pitcher. There's no
You
pitcher.
didn't know T-ball?
No, I did. I had an idea. I knew what T-ball was. I didn't know it was called T-ball specifically because there's no pitcher and they have to use.
No, he didn't hit that. It fell off. I'll punch you up. I'll punch you.
How cute. No, but that's the thing. You got kids that are that young. It's a lovely event. Have fun. It's not that important.
No, the work of being a horrible example for your kids starts at a young age. You can't wait until they're teens or whatever. It's too late. They might be, fully functioning humans at that point.
All right.
Well adjusted and everything.
Let's talk about table saws.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what you're about to say is something I totally agree with, but I want to hear more details about your experience. But set it up for the audience.
Okay, so I have become, since I've moved, I've had space to try to do some like fun hand stuff, Don't put it that way.
You went there.
Some crafts work.
You went there.
I got a space for some hand stuff.
No, not nerd Bart. He's like,
Anyway.
since I moved, I've had some time and space to do some fun hand stuff.
We got a new place. I got my wife. Hand stuff time. Anyway, no, it's the pandemic and we make digital content. So a lot of people, want something physical in their life. Anyway, God.
Handiwork, you mean?
I've got a bang garage, basically. That's what I've got. Anyway, no. So in the same way that I like to play board games, because it's something you can gather around, it's something where you're moving bits of cardboard and stuff around. I want to do something physical. So So I've gotten into a little bit of woodworking, and there is no way that I would have been in woodworking at all if it hadn't been for you over the past few years talking about doing crafty stuff and making things and stuff. So I've been doing that. I made a front bench for my house. I made a nightstand / elevated dog bed holder for my wife. I just completed a matching nightstand for my side, and they both look super DIY-ish, but I matched them very well. So anyway, I want to try something more complicated. What I want to make is a board game coffee table, which I am assuming almost nobody in the audience even knows what that would be, right? Do you know what that would be?
Yes, I do, because you explained it on a previous post-game episode. But it is a table that has a top that lifts to accommodate a board game or various board games.
It does.
Yes, I remember. I'm a good friend. I'm a good listener.
It is. So basically, it's a table with a top that comes off, and it's like people have storage coffee tables.
Yes, absolutely.
But this is a little bit different in that it's one big open space, and it's some sort of neoprene or felt or like poker table material, something nice to play on or whatever. So I want to make it. It's more complicated than stuff I've made before. It's going to require a little bit more skills. I've been watching a lot of DIY and maker YouTubers. It's like my favorite area of YouTube now. There are people who make such amazing stuff.
Yes.
But one thing I need for it is a piece of equipment I didn't have, which is a table saw. Everything I'd made before is made with like a drill, impact driver, and miter saw, basically. Table saw, I had to borrow from you. It's more dangerous. Now, you have experience with a table saw. Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, okay, so a lot can go wrong with the table saw. It's very easy to hurt yourself with the table saw because you need to understand like how high, like you can move the blade up or down, right? And you don't want the blade to be too high because that could, I think part of the reason why is it's, first of all, which is more dangerous overall, but it could lead to more kickback. And that's the thing, kickback is what terrifies me about the table saw the most. If you don't have the piece of wood up against the fence, like flush against the fence as you're cutting, it's very easy for it to lead to kickback where you can really hurt yourself or hurt someone around you, right? Like, so there's that. I always worry about the kickback the most. There's also the possibility where you might make the wrong move and your hand gets close to the blade and you lose a finger. So there are numerous ways where you can really hurt yourself. And then this is not that important, but it's important for me because I don't live in a house. I live in a building with an overzealous HOA. And so the noise, it's very, very, very loud.
Sure.
And so I can't really use it inside the building. I found like a power outlet in our parking garage and I try to use it there, but I'm not really supposed to. So like there's a lot of stress that I feel whenever I need to use that table saw, a lot of stress.
Yeah, so it was super loud. I theoretically could just use it. I use my miter saw with the garage open, but I closed the garage because it's just so loud. But yeah, there's kickback, which I don't know if you define this.
You define it.
So you're putting a piece of material through and it decides, no, it's going in the other way and it's going fast and it sends it like a bullet shooting back.
Like a bullet, very
super fast. Super, like you don't want that to hit you in the midsection. So I experienced a little bit of that, but I was to the side purposefully. And it was a very thin piece of material. The kickback started when the saw was slowing down. It was almost off, but it still went against the garage door and everything. But anyway, also you left out, so you mentioned kickback and your hand might touch. What you left out was, it is a flat plane with a spinning James Bondian torture device blade. And it's on the ground.
Yeah.
So my fear is.
Hold on. So the table saw, my table saw was gifted to me by a wonderful person. Jordan, I love you, thank you so much for that.
I didn't know that, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Jordan.
Wonderful gift. The table saw is fantastic. It came with a table that you're supposed to put the table saw on, but the table was too flimsy. And so when I use it, just for more stability, I use it on the ground, and that's what I recommended for John.
Sure.
So that's why, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but imagine like if you get up to go around or something, like, first of all, I'm just worried about tripping. There's cords, there's sawdust on the floor. If you fall on that thing, lights out, that's it, you're done. So I was very worried about that. So my first few cuts and everything, I was just super intimidated. I got in the hang of it and I used it a bunch. I've done a good bit of the board game table now. But it was pretty scary as you're like feeding that thing through and everything. The miter saw by comparison, miter saw is a saw that you just bring it down.
Yeah.
That's nothing. That's like nothing at all now compared to the open table saw. And people are saying in the comments, my friend said something like this. There are new table saws with lasers.
Yes. Okay, go. Read it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's supposed. It says it won't even cut a hot dog.
Amazing.
No,
it's amazing.
I don't believe it at all.
It's amazing.
When I turn off your saw, it still takes like 8 seconds before it stops spinning.
It's real. It's real. I didn't believe it when I went to a wood shop. It was a gift that Christian had gotten me for I don't remember what, but we went together for an introductory woodworking class, and they had one of those table saws there. And when the instructor was telling us about it, I was like, don't believe it. No, I don't believe it. And he demonstrated it. And it blew my mind.
That what?
It's so incredible.
Like if you go to put something on it, it'll stop.
It stops. It stops like, and by the way, there's YouTube videos demonstrating it. So your friend.
I'm gonna look that up. So that would be a big peace of mind for me.
I don't know. You guys probably can't pull up videos right now, but maybe we'll show it in a later post-game episode. No, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
And they demonstrate it with a hot dog, which is why hot dog was mentioned in that comment. It's so incredible. God, woodworking is so exciting.
It is exciting. It's very difficult. So I've made a good portion of the table at this point, but every step of the way there's having to learn things because basically imagine a box with no top. It's just a flat surface and it's the 4 walls. But what I want is I want to be able to put a tabletop on and have it be flush with the walls. So the 4 walls each have like they have the back part and then they have an indentation all the way around for it to set flush in. That's a little bit complicated actually.
Yeah.
So but I've been learning stuff. It's fun. Obviously it's not the sort of hobby that you need space. It doesn't have to be expensive, by the way. There's like this idea that it has to be expensive. That's not true. Brands like Ryobi, the tools are very cheap. But that said, it's still more expensive than other hobbies. So
totally, yeah.
But it is fun and it's nice to make something. Like I have furniture now. My dog sleeps on a thing I made. You know, I like that sort of thing.
You know, there are a lot of downsides to the internet, right? But the one thing you mentioned, YouTube videos and people making incredible things.
There's so many good channels.
There's so many wonderful channels that educate you on anything you want to learn, really. And so when Christian and I moved and we realized this place needs a lot of repairs, we don't have the money for it, we need to do a lot of it on our own, we had to learn, right? And so I thought, it's funny, like I don't know if I thought I was gonna hate it, but through learning, through all these super helpful YouTube channels, I just realized like, man, I actually have other interests and passions that I've never even explored because, you know, like in America and a lot of other countries too, but especially in America, like from the moment you're born, it's almost like you're conditioned to focus on one thing. Like it's your profession, don't like
what do you want to be
laser vision. And if you're not like that, you're never gonna succeed in your chosen profession. Like that, I feel like that's how my entire career has been. So I don't know, like I've just been like kind of thinking about other things that I love doing. Woodworking is certainly one of them. I love making flower arrangements. Like I've been doing that for fun.
I've never heard you talk, but that's awesome.
I just love flowers. Like I love all of that. But hobbies are great. I think we all need hobbies. Keeps you out of trouble. Keeps you off of, you know, Facebook,
off the
Twitter.
Streets.
No.
Keeps you out of the Capitol.
Keeps you out of the Capitol.
Keeps you out of the building when you're not supposed to be there. Yeah. Yeah. That's why, you know, over the last year I wrote my book. That's why I'm doing this. It's fun.
Yeah. What's your hobby, Craig? Putting you on the spot.
I like disc golf and
golf. Disc golf.
Disc golf.
Sports. I love just going outside.
Nice. Yeah. Going outside is great.
He plays D&D as well.
Yeah.
A Starfinder. Yeah.
A lot of movies. All day.
Yeah, what's D&D? Is that a video game?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, got
which someday we're gonna get you playing RPG.
I like how you guys shortened it to D&D.
That's we came up with that. Yes.
Oh man. All right. Well, that was fun. Everyone, thank you for watching the post-game show. We're gonna end just a few minutes early, but don't worry, the fun continues with Brett Ehrlich and Happy Half Hour right after the bonus episode on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TYT. You can become a subscriber for free by going to, I forget what the website was.
What kind of subscriber?
Because you can be a free subscriber through Amazon, right?
Oh yeah. You can link your account, use those Bezos bucks if you want.
Yes, use those Bezos bucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, love you guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
What?